Sort of Coming Chapter 1233. Chapter 1233. This mountain will be named Shin from now on. There is more than one cross-continental ferry, so the dragon-slaying stone must be something to look at. After boarding the ship, Dragon Snake traces, and looking far into the distance, Shanju Chin accidentally saw the dragon's back mountain. Mi Jiangxian's proposal shouldn't be made when there are many people. Being the chief of the next sect, you still feel wronged. Li Muzhou is currently the master of Jingwei Temple. When the Taoist priest came, the Yuanying realm had not yet reached its bottleneck, but when he left, it was already in Yupu. Previously, in the study room of Taoist master Xianwei, the gatekeeper of Luopa Mountain, Li Muzhou seemed to have been enlightened by a word, and his mood was enlightened. It was like a heavy rain washing away the dust, and it was like the clouds were clearing and the sun appeared. The momentum was like breaking bamboo. When Li Muzhou came out of the state of mental fasting and came back to his senses, he broke through the state, and there was no stagnation. The Taoist priest who felt refreshed still carefully checked his mind, and it turned out that there was nothing wrong with him. Li Muzhou immediately stood up from his chair. The thousands of words in his heart seemed to be a burden, so he had no choice but to give a very solemn speech. Like a Taoist priest worshipping a Taoist mountain that towers over the sky and the earth. This time, the Taoist Xianwei was completely confused. Directorly, even if you don't know the answer to the question on the origami page, you don't have to feel so guilty if you can't answer it. The key is why your eyes are still red. After much thought, Xianwei could only come up with an answer that was barely convincing to him. He was worthy of being a serious Taoist priest from a famous sect. There are so many etiquettes. Apologies are so polite. Xianwei wanted to give Li Muzhou a head-turning gift. After all, he was the gatekeeper of Luola Mountain, and the new mountain master of Fragrant Mountain. He also accepted an apprentice. The burden on his shoulders was heavy. With more status, he couldn't lack it. God etiquette. Unexpectedly, the mountain master appeared in the study out of thin air, stretched out his hand to hold Xianwei's arm, and the intention was obvious, so that Xianwei did not have to return the favor. If he hadn't become the master of Jingwei Temple, Li Muzhou might have been the Taoist priest who wanted to stay the most because of the heavy workload. This Luo mountain, strange or not, really made Li Muzhou feel too natural unfriendly. At that time, Chen Pingon accompanied Li Muzhou out of the house. The rain outside had stopped. Li Muzhou even forgot to take away the oil paper umbrella. Xianwei took note of the incident, picked up the umbrella and ran to the door, calling out to Director Li, but Chen Pingon turned around and smiled. He said, "Just take it as a token of gratitude from Master Li, just accept it." Xianwei had no choice but to accept it. Li Muzhou was a little shy and explained to Shanju Chin in a low voice, "That umbrella is just an ordinary object." Chen Pingon smiled and said, "That's good. It's light on courtesy but heavy on affection." Taoist Master Xianwei now has a mountain top, which is not too close to here. It's quite tiring. It's rainy, so it's useful when walking on the road. Li Muzhou hesitated to speak, just because his situation was too mysterious. Chen Pingon held his hands in his sleeves and helped to give an explanation that was far-fetched and very reasonable, but extremely reasonable. People who practice, the accumulation of Tao power is normal. They stay up late at night and read the rooster crow, without even realizing it. The world is white. Li Muzhou nodded and said with a smile, "In any case, Mr. Chen's Luo Mountain is really a blessed place for poor people. I will come here often whenever I have the opportunity. I hope Mr. Chen won't get tired of it if I have more times." Chen Pingon said, "Since it can become a blessed place for Taoist priestly, it is naturally because the plants and trees here are closely related to the Taoist priest. The vegetation is like this, not to mention humans." Li Muzhou asked, "Where is the house?" Chen Pingon smiled and said, Dao Zhongli can show up now. Li Muzhou walked out of the house, bowed his head to Chen Pingan, and walked up the mountain alone. Chen Pingan walked towards the table. It turned out that Grandmaster Wen did not wait for Pei Qian, but instead waited for Bai Xian, who was waiting for him. He was encouraging Wen to sign a certain book carefully. "Don't you want to ask Pei Qian about boxing? Come with us, there are many people and strength, and it is difficult for 2 fists to defeat 4 hands. With Brother Wen's full help, it will be easy to collect a Pei Qian in the future." Wen Qingqing was completely confused. He had no idea what was going on in the mind of this kid who drank wolfberry tea from a pot and invited him to join the gang as soon as they met. Seeing the middle-aged man in a green shirt and long coat, Wen carefully stood up with a strange expression on his face and his body tensed up. He cupped his fists and said, "Lingfei Palace, Wen carefully pays homage to Qin Jianxian. On top of Hehuan Mountain, the younger generation is frivolous and ignorant, and has offended many people." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "There's nothing you can't offend. To say the least, it's nothing to offend me. We're not a family anyway. It's a big deal. Outside of Luola Mountain and Lingfei Palace, if you and I want to meet again, we can compete in the sky. It's still difficult. But have you still not guessed who that person is until now?" Wen carefully wondered, "Are you talking about the person who was drinking at the same table with Qin Jianxian?" Chen Pingan said, "Otherwise." Wen carefully thought about Grandmaster Pei Qian now, and almost had inner demons. He couldn't care about that arrogant bastard. If possible, he really wanted to give him a big mouth. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Wen, think carefully, that sentence, if I am your master's grandmaster, Taoist master, I will be your grandmaster's master, can anyone say it?" Wen Zhan carefully felt as if he was struck by 5 thunders and was dumbfounded. Is it really the portrait of the patriarch hanging at the highest point in the Dao Palace Patriarch Hall? The white jade Jinglu headmaster wearing a lotus crown. Wen Jingxin's face was filled with tears. Facing the direction of Hehuan Mountain, he knelt down 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. He broke down in tears and said in a trembling voice, "Lingfei Palace Wen Jingxin, pay homage to the Supreme Patriarch and pay homage to Master Lu. Lu Chen's lineage respects teachers and has nothing to say. From the Xiancha who dared to scold everyone except his master, to the Tianjun Chao Rong who was deceived by his master and delayed his promotion for a long time but never complained, to his disciple Sun Xiangjuan, as well as Zhao Fuyang, who still recognized Lu Chen as his ancestor even though he was expelled from the sect, Qing Qian, the real man who was about to fight Zhao Fuyang because he violated Taoism. And of course the arrogant person in front of him. Wen carefully. Bai Xian asked from the bottom of his heart, "Master Chao, what's going on with this guy? Let me explain in advance, I didn't say anything. The conscience of heaven and earth just invited him to occupy a place on the hero spectrum." Chen Pingan explained, "It has nothing to do with you. He always wanted to meet someone, but he didn't recognize him when he saw him. He missed it. It's hard to say whether there will be a chance to meet again in this life." Bai Xian nodded. In this way, he can be regarded as a man of good temperament. For such a good man, he deserves to be included in the hero spectrum. Chen Pingan stretched out his hand and said, "Take that booklet and take a look at it." Bai Xian's spirit was shaken and he said happily, "Master Chao, you also want to register your name?" "That's sure." Chen Pingan hit her with a chestnut, causing Bai Xian to hold his head in his hands and laugh angrily. "Do you know that when Pei Qian was your age, I had to go through my head several times before I could even say a word to her and make sense of it?" As expected of Bai Xian asked tentatively, "Master Chao, is it possible that once Pei Qian's boxing level reaches a high level, he will be less willing to use his brain?" Chen Pingan rubbed his eyebrows, stretched out his hand to hold Bai Xian's head, and said with a smile, "You are brave. After Wen stood up carefully, his expression returned to normal. Chen Pingan said, "If Master Wen Xian is not in a hurry, just go and wait at Tiaoyu Mountain. Pei Qian will show up to have a sparring session or two with you in the near future." Wen carefully differentiated between the two and said, "I don't dare to say it's a discussion. I just want to ask Grandmaster Pei for some advice." Chen Pingan said, "Of course you are a martial arts genius, but you are not a pure martial artist." Wen was careful and silent. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "If you really want to learn boxing, it will be easy to go up the mountain, but not necessarily down the mountain." Wen said carefully, "Junior is already mentally prepared." Chen Pingan pointed in the direction of Tiaoyu Mountain. "Pei Qian is already waiting for you at the foot of the mountain." Wen carefully clasped his fists and said goodbye, and ran away with great momentum. A series of sounds like rolling thunder on the ground sounded on the road. Bai Xian praised, "How dare you challenge Pei Qian alone? It is indeed respectable and admirable. It is worthy of me to make an exception and write down his name first. Pei Qian has followed his master so far in the world, and there has been a tacit understanding between master and disciple." For example, when Zhou Haijing wanted to ask about boxing, Chen Pingan said, "If you are too worried about winning, don't take it too seriously. This means we need to pay attention to this discussion, but don't hurt the harmony." What Chen Pingan and Pei Qian said today happened to have the sentences reversed. The meaning is not difficult to understand. In fact, the only thing is that you can't beat someone to death. When Wen carefully arrived at the foot of Tiaoyu Mountain, he just clasped his fists and was about to speak. Pei Qian just said, "Same situation. In a blink of an eye, the punch has arrived." Wen carefully had no time to parry, let alone fight back, when he was hit in the neck by Pei Qian and knocked down with a punch. Wen Xining's eyes were instantly bloodshot, and the energy and blood in his body surged like a flood. Pei Qian lightly stamped her foot again, and Wen Qianxin, who was lying on the ground with blood pouring from his orifices, jumped up. Pei Qian came to his side, and with the tip of her toes, she threw Wen Qianxin into the martial arts arena on the mountain. "It's really easy to go up the mountain." Someone suddenly fell from the sky. The 6 martial arts practitioners were shocked. Wen carefully lay on the dirt floor of the martial arts arena. He struggled to get up several times and vomited out a large mouthful of blood. However, his energy and blood became smoother. When he opened his eyes, he saw a blue sky and felt so comfortable. "If you can't withstand Pei Qian's 2 punches, you won't go down the mountain." Qin Yuanji just glanced at it and shouted, "Keep walking." A man sitting on the bench picking his feet hurriedly shouted, "This dear man who fell from the sky is not allowed to come here to cheat us for medicine money." From that day on, there was a martial arts master in Tiaoyu Mountain who only received 1 punch from Pei Qian every day. Then he negotiated the price with Master Zhang and made a bucket of potion. The price changed every day. The market was still different. Wen carefully didn't bother to worry about it and let Master Zhang keep it in his account. The 6 people who originally thought that learning boxing in Tiaoyu Mountain was quite difficult, saw with their own eyes a Yuan realm master falling to the ground every day, sleeping peacefully for a while, and then getting up unsteadily, his clothes soaked in blood, and every step he took, the ground was covered with blood. They are all bright red footprints. From this point of view, learning boxing is not difficult. Pei Qian came over to teach boxing at odd hours. Wen Qianqian liked it better if he taught boxing in the morning. After receiving a punch, he felt like his whole body was falling apart, so he went to take a steaming hot potion bath, then changed into clean clothes, and felt sitting on the small bench in a refreshing mood, chatting with Master Zhang and watching the boys and girls practice boxing. It was very good and the day was very fulfilling. If Pei Qian only came to feed him at night, Wen Qianqian would have been worried for a long time, sitting on the bench sickly and unable to cheer up. He did not dare to ask Pei Qian for help. Master Zheng was still kind and helped Pei Qian. After a discussion, the daily discussion was scheduled to be at 6 o'clock in the morning. As a reward, Wen Qingqing would also lend a hand to Master Zheng and Master Zhen, teaching 6 children a few stances and boxing moves. Over and over again, the name Master Wen came up. Because Master Zheng, who doesn't care about people by their appearance, was accompanying him to make jokes and talk about the mountains, Wen carefully didn't find his life of training and teaching boxing in the mountains to be boring. 2 guys who live in poverty and enjoy happiness on the top of a mountain are lying on wicker chairs. The swordsman eats melon seeds and the master eats longans. Brother Zhong, it doesn't seem to be a problem for you to be so idle every day. I heard that the swordsman Chao Ni is already a martial artist in the Golden Body realm, and that he Qizhou is not a weakling, he is the best in the world. Don't want the name anymore. Brother me, I will go to Tiaoyu Mountain tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. I heard from Xiao Mili that there is a far-traveling realm martial artist named Wen Qingxin there. I will go and meet him for a while. Brother Zhong, if I remember correctly, you said the same thing the day before yesterday, saying that you would meet with Xing Dafeng for a while to weigh up the worth of the new janitor. The old cook's toppings this morning didn't taste as good as yesterday. Is it because him being naughty, or is the old cook being careless and perfunctory to our brothers today? Brother Zhong, please help me think of a more reliable way to postpone the date of going to Tongyi's house. Go to the sword worship platform and have a fight with that old deaf boy. If you get injured, you can stay and recuperate. The old deaf boy may not be willing to agree to this. Brother Mi is the chief worshipper of the lower sect after all. Even when discussing matters in the Jisa Peak Patriarch Hall, the seat position is still very forward. Although the old deaf boy is of a higher level, after all he is just an ordinary worshipper of our Luolu mountain. Guanda, it's a first-level crushing thing, not to mention that you are half a fellow villager, and he won't even give you any face. No way. That's too bad of a person. Ha! That makes sense. Brother Zhong, have you thought of what to eat for tonight's late-night snack? I'm worried. Don't worry, think about it quickly. Xiao Mili told me privately that the skill of the old cook is directly linked to our requirements. Okay, if that's the case, then I'll have to show my shame and give everyone more pleasure. The number of Taoist priests who finally chose to stay in Luopa Mountain became 4 because of one more Liang Chaoguan who temporarily changed his mind. Of course Liang Chaoguan was very afraid of Master Qin Shan, but when the young Taoist priest thought about the great reputation of his uncle, Yi Chushi, he felt even more uncertain. This was called choosing the lesser of 2 evils. This is really not that Liang Chaoguan is timid. In fact, there are many Taoist priests, Tafushan and Duran sect who respect Yi Dan. Although Yi Dan, native place, is from the second peak of Taofu Mountain, and her dojo is on the mountain behind the second peak, Yi Dan is also an ascending master of one of the top performers of the Do Ran sect. The reason why she is the leader of 2 channels is because there is a mysterious cause and effect on the mountain. If Yi Dan had not been robbed at the Sword Chi Great Wall, he was destined to be unable to escape. Otherwise, with Yi Dan qualifications and bones, he would definitely be an immortal, should have been the peak master of the second peak a long time ago. The Taoist protector who was supposed to get a chance to help her escape was the Taoist companion of Tong Meng, the founder of the Do Ran sect and one of the 6 direct descendants of Yu Xian. However, she was injured in order to save Yi Dan on the battlefield. At the root of the Tao, she soon died, and her reincarnation in this life is the female Crown Wenxia who was brought back to the mountains by Yi Dan himself to renew their immortal relationship. Yi Dan felt guilty about the Do Ran sect, so she only kept the Taoist Book of Air Ho Feng from the Jin Yu genealogy. Then she transferred to the Do Ran sect with her own Taoist power and accumulated merits, and was gradually promoted to a high official in the Do Ran sect. In addition, she also served as one of the special Taoist officials of the Tafushan Patriarch Hall, responsible for inspecting the merits and demerits of the Taoist priests of the four sects in the mountain. There are even some rumors that in the early years, Yu Xian had privately approached Yi Dan and asked her if she had the idea of serving as the Taofu priest of the Tafushan Patriarch Hall. She said no. It is rumored that Yi Dan's reason is that his moral character is too low to hold a big position. But in fact, there is no such nonsense. Yi Dan and the Patriarch Yu Xian, from the beginning to the end, she just said the word no. There are only 6 Taoist embryos on Tiaoyu Mountain, and the preachers include the second seat of Lola Mountain to worship Xiago, the man who was captured for a few days to worship Gontang, and the ones who moved here from Jiling Peak, the 4 high-spirited Taoist sects of the Middle-earth Divine Continent. 6 people went to the mountain to practice, and there were 6 masters who helped them preach. Aren't the 2 sides of learning and preaching equal to one-on-one? Generally speaking, the so-called direct descendants on the mountain are mostly the situation where one master leads several direct descendants. How can there be such special treatment that is rare and unimaginable, and is undreamed of in dreams? This made the 6 people who learned Taoism from Tiaoyu Mountain, all of them the girl in the mink hat who first came to Tiaoyu Mountain to be a master. She called herself Bai Jing, and she had beheaded several throne monsters. Anyone who dared to believe such a thing would be suspicious. Probably on the battlefield of the Great Sword Chi Wall, I threw a flying sword at a certain throne demon from a distance the day before yesterday, and yesterday I threw a spell at another throne demon from a distance. Is that considered cut down? Xiago doesn't have much patience when it comes to preaching. Often, whenever they ask a question, Xiago, who always likes to put second seat in his mouth, will stare at someone and look at each other, and the latter doesn't know what he is asking. Too mysterious or too superficial. Later, Xiago felt that their previous learning paths were too unsightly, so he randomly threw out several qi refining breathing techniques and cave transporting techniques, a total of 6 types, which happened to belong to 6 categories, for them to practice well. Don't pick and choose, learn them all. She will test the results after a while, and first determine their general qualifications for learning different Taoist methods. Then she will make a decision on how to tailor the teachings to them and start a small teaching. The 6 people didn't know what was going on. No matter how good their qualifications were, and no matter how they were said to be monastic geniuses, they were still the outstanding ones in a certain country in Aquarius continent. Who knew the meaning of the Taoist name Bai Jing? Who knew that this girl in the mink hat was a well-deserved dragon among the Taoist priests, among the cranes on the ancient land? In any case, in the minds of the 6 of them, at least for the time being, Master Xia's Taoist attainments seemed to be inferior to that of the general worshipper, Gontang, who came later. Master Gon was able to answer all questions, and all doubts could be answered one by one. Helped to solve doubts, and the answers were extremely precise and targeted. The old deaf and mute child was eating Coptish Chinensis, and occasionally looked cautiously at Senior Bai Jing in the distance. The latter smiled, nodded, and gave an encouraging or gratifying look. He was teaching well. It makes old deaf children worry about whether they, who work part-time as part-time workers, will become full-time workers. He comes from Taofu Mountain, his ancestral home, and is the first disciple of Yang Xianbao at Hebei Peak. He is Xiangtong and is in the Yuanying realm. In terms of seniority, he is Fu Lu Yuxuan's grandson. In fact, he is already too tall to be taller. Fixiangying Lebiu is a disciple of Tianjun Shuizhisui. Bai Feng is the direct disciple of Meizhen, the head of the Do Ran sect. There is also the first peak of Taofu Mountain and Liang Chaoguan. Among the 3 young golden elixir immortals, Liang Chaoguan was still a sword cultivator. When the elixir reached the 2nd level, he also gave birth to a natal flying sword. The sword rotated with the qi, and within the heaven and earth of Liang Chaoguan's body, an auspicious vision of Hui Shuo Xian Wang appeared over and over again, which made the ancestral Taoist book Hunyuan 8 sword scripture enshrined in the patriarch hall of Ho Feng, ready to move, like paying homage, like congratulations. Master immediately helped to report this great news to the patriarch hall, so Liang Chaoguan was qualified to visit Yunmeng Cave. He and Hebifeng Xiangtong had always disliked each other. One thought that the other was enjoying the blessings of others. Every time he appeared, his eyes were above his eyebrows. One of them felt that the other party had grown up outside the Fulu Avenue because his cultivation aptitude was too mediocre, and he had become some kind of sword cultivator and had no future prospects. If it hadn't been for this trip to Luola Mountain, since we hate each other, it would be better not to see each other. Taofu Mountain is a vast territory with more than 20 peaks, and there are more than 300 Taoist temples and palaces in the mountain. There are so many Taoist priests. You can imagine how many Taoist priests you will see at those two immortal ferry crossings today. If you want to see each other again, I don't know if it's the year of the monkey or the month of the horse. I never thought that now they would have to get along day and night, seeing each other every day. Bai Xian got Guazuji's advice and went into seclusion without saying hello to anyone. It's called retreat, but it's just a matter of closing the door and sitting on the futon. Bai Xian only used a stick of incense to break through seclusion. When he came out of seclusion, he was already a Dragon Gate sword cultivator with full energy and swordsmanship. A natal flying sword hovers around Bai Xian, just like thousands of white clouds lingering around a majestic mountain. There is almost a sign that the clouds are carrying the mountain to the blue sky. Bai Xian dropped his sleeves and said the word "show," and the flying sword returned to the center of his eyebrows. When Bai Xian heard the commotion outside the house, he immediately became unhappy and looked down on whom. Do you feel that your retreat may not be successful and you need protection? Or do you feel that you have become a small Dragon Gate realm and you want to say a few words of congratulations to me? These are all stinky habits. We, Luo Luoshan, cannot let you lead us into bad habits. Uncle Bai will not tolerate you being so vain and pretentious. As soon as I swallowed several kilograms of arsenic, I saw everyone scolding me when I left the house. As a result, Bai Xian turned around and saw Master Chao there, sitting on a bamboo chair in the corridor of his house. Bai Xian immediately rubbed his hands, squeezed out a bright smile on his face, and trotted to the man in blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, smoking a dry cigarette. In front of the guy, a man suddenly stood still and said, "Master Chao, there's no need to worry." Chen Pingon smiled and said, "This retreat has taken up a lot of time, and I spent half a stick of incense more than I expected. Next time I retreat, I will keep up the good work." Xiaomi Li sat aside, holding a golden pole and a green bamboo staff, and clapped silently with both hands. "It's awesome." Chen Pingon stood up, put the dry tobacco stick into his sleeve, waved the smoke, and said with a smile, "Old deaf boy, we have enough manpower to help preach in Tiaoyu Mountain, so you don't have to worry about it. I'm the master of preaching. Too many, but it is easy for those who want to learn Taoism not to know where to start, and to bite off more than they can chew. Of course, if you are particularly interested in teaching, you can also go there and take a look. In short, this matter is not forced, it is all based on your personal hobbies." If the old deaf child is granted amnesty, his old face, which was originally wrinkled in pain, gradually becomes more relaxed. Never thought that Senior Bai Jing would look askance and want to run away. You are an ordinary worshipper, with a low status and a big attitude. You still want to learn some swordsmanship from Xiao Mo and me. Do you know how difficult it was to get a line or two of true biography in ancient times? How many enlightened demon Qigong masters back then were willing to serve as gatekeepers of caves and guardians of dojos for hundreds of years in order to learn Taoism from a certain enlightened man? The old deaf child knew that he was on a pirate ship, so he had to pretend to think and temporarily changed his words. Mountain Master, I think it is best to do something from beginning to end. I won't go to Tiaoyu Mountain every day, so as not to hinder me. When other masters are teaching, it is not difficult to go over there occasionally and give a few pointers, and it should be so. Chen Pingon looked embarrassed and said thoughtfully, You won't delay Gantang's self-cultivation, right? The old deaf man glanced at the young Yingguan. The Yingguan didn't have any definite clues, so he had to make the least wrong choice. No, since I have become the worshipper of Luopa Mountain, I have to do something within my ability. Just like a strict master who preaches, he asks his lazy disciple, You are practicing so diligently and staying up late to complete your Taoist courses. Isn't it going to hurt your mind? Please pay more attention to your body. Chen Pingon nodded and said, As long as it comes to your mind, it's enough to make do with the missionary work at Tiaoyu Mountain. The old deaf boy has a smile on his face and has told you all his beautiful words. I'll just give in. Isn't it just that we are not particular about it? This Luola Mountain is really not a place for an honest person to stay. It's really not a place for humans. As soon as the man named Chen left, the old deaf boy saw that Senior Bai Jing looked unhappy. The old deaf child felt distressed. Where did he say the wrong thing again? Before leaving the sword worship platform, Chen Pingon smiled from the bottom of his heart and said, When Xiaomo returns to the mountain, you two will more or less take the time to teach Gontang Shi one or two excellent sword skills that are suitable for him. Xiago reluctantly said, The old deaf boy is not worthy of being taught swordsmanship by Xiaomo himself. I can choose a good time to teach him two useless swordsmanship. This time it was the mountain master's turn to look askance at the second seat. Xiago had no choice but to explain sincerely, Lord of the Mountain, two monks have the same swordsmanship, and one kind of Taoism can be divided into 3 scholars. How can they be the same? My worthless ribs are Gantang's supreme treasure. Don't worry, he will definitely be grateful when the time comes. Damn it, if it were me, if I could help a few children preach casually for a few days and talk a lot of nonsense, I would be able to learn 2 things from someone, even if it's just a kind of superb swordsmanship that makes Bai Jing admire him. From this sword worship platform to Tiaoyu Mountain, I have to walk there on my knees every day, even if I crawl there. Lord of the Mountain, I will tell you the truth. Extremely determined, and will move forward without hesitation. Chen Pingon said helplessly, I believe what you said before, and it is indeed sincere. As for the last sentence, don't add any superfluous words. Xiaomo will occasionally talk to me about some past events. Your so-called desire to seek the truth, isn't it what you are saying now? The ancestor of Sawano Shio. Kill a few, get a few secret books, learn them, and then block the next group of people. If you hear the instructions that are pleasant to your ears, you will accept them all. Xiago said shyly, Xiao Mo is really serious, that's right. Chen Pingon said, No wonder Mr. Zheng looks at you with admiration. It turns out that he regards you as a senior on the road. Xiago said cautiously, City Lord Jing often robs homes, kills people, steals goods, and destroys corpses and traces. Chen Pingon smiled and said, That's not the case. It needs to be more subtle and in line with the rules. After all, we are in the vast world. If it were in the wilderness, it would be hard to say. Wouldn't it be worse than Zhou? Xiago said, If the mountain master hadn't opened his mouth and calmed his cheeks, it would be impossible for Xiaomo and I to teach Gontang the swordsmanship. Chen Pingon asked curiously, Why? Xiago grinned and said, Xiao Mo doesn't like cowards like old deaf children. Xiaomo didn't like it, so she just didn't like it. Chen Pingon said, You don't know something. According to the secret records of the Summer Palace, this Taoist friend Longxing also performed great feats when he was young. The old deaf boy is unwilling to open this pot of old wine and invite people to drink. It's not easy for me as an outsider to overstep my authority. The cross-continental ferry, Dragon Snake Trace, which never leaves Nujiafu, is leased to Luoyuashan for free for 100 years. It can be said that it is a good thing that the pie in the sky is delivered directly to the mouth. Jiang Shangjin had already walked around the ferry carefully and shook his head. Even if Yu Laozhen was more sincere and willing to take the initiative to send dozens of main drawings and hundreds of appendix drawings to Luopa Mountain, it would probably be a pile of waste paper in Chen Pingan's hands. The reason couldn't be simpler. A rough calculation showed that there were more than 360 individual talismans that Chen Pingan needed to dismantle one by one. There are extremely many talisman boats in the world. This boat can be called the ancestor of the Fuzhou. When he was young, Jiang Shangjin once asked Mr. Sun a very innocent question: why not make the secret Taoism of the Patriarch Hall public so that anyone in the sect can learn it? The old man just patted the young man on the head and said something vague. When you become the master of the family one day, you will know that whether you are willing or not is different from whether you can. The village school replaced Mr. Jiang, who was said to be Mr. Chen's substitute teacher for a period of time. I don't know what Mr. Jiang came to say to a certain shrewish woman. The next day, a child who dropped out of the village school and went to another village to go to another village jumped a class. He didn't have to walk far to and from school every day. This child Tong was very happy. Generally speaking, among the dozen or so village schoolboys, some prefer Mr. Jiang, while others prefer Mr. Chen. Taoist Ding returned to Luola Mountain alone, with a complicated look on his face. I heard that Mr. Chen was in retreat at Fuyao foothills. Fortunately, the mountain master left a message to Xiaomili before he retreated, saying that when Taoist Ding returned, he would ask him to go to Fuyao foothills to discuss Taoism with him. Chen Pingan is indeed refining his sword in seclusion. The one who protects the gate is Xia Dog. So Xiago is now even more dissatisfied with the old deaf boy, who is squatting in the manhole and not pooping. If you continue to work like this and show no effort, you will be stripped of the titles that are usually enshrined. However, before this retreat, the mountain master said that there would naturally be people willing to offer sacrifices in Gantang's place, and the preaching master of Taoyu Mountain would still be able to gather the number of 6 people. Is this the Taoist priest in front of me? Xiago asked. I left and came back again. What do you want? Who doesn't know how to speak politely? Taoist Ding asked from his heart. Will the words of Xiao Dao and the seniors disturb Mr. Chen's retreat? Xiago smiled and shook his head and said, no, the distance is just like 2 worlds. With your skills, you won't be able to disturb our mountain master's sword refining even if you want to. Taoist Ding took off his boots and sat in the corridor with his head buried in his hands. He was a little listless and said helplessly, Xiao Dao can no longer distinguish between the words Yu Pu and immortal. It was on the way to Shui Tianjin's talisman boat that he reviewed the situation with the Taoist priests. Taoist Ding suddenly woke up and realized that he was in the immortal realm. Where is Yu Pu, who is so careful that the sun and moon burn his life? Xiago suddenly said, it seems that our mountain master is quite impressed with you and is willing to polish your calf-nosed Taoist priest. Seeing that you are not sensible and you are not enlightened, I have to find an excuse to let you return to the mountain. It is a good thing. Don't be miserable. With a face. The implication behind Xiago's words is very simple. Don't be ignorant of praise and don't distinguish between good and bad. Be careful of being chopped down. In the house, Master Qin Shanshan was practicing his sword the day before yesterday and was tricked for the 2nd time. Last time, a shocking groove was created on the neck. What is amazing is not that the injury is exaggerated, but that the 14 realms behind the scenes, hiding in the shadows, are able to ignore the Luola Mountain Protective Formation and the numerous restrictions at Fuyao Foot, without revealing any clues. Just let a martial artist who was on the first level of the Realm of Realms suffer such an injury. The second time he struck cruelly, he directly opened a wound on the back of Qin Pingan, who was immersed in refining the sword, with bones visible. This made Xiago, who was responsible for guarding the gate, gnashed his teeth in anger. Fortunately, Qin Pingan gave up refining the sword again, but the old was still there, and he was not at all decadent. He opened the door, sat in the corridor, and chatted with Xiago for a while. Fortunately, Qin Pingan had a caged bird. Otherwise, the consequences of retreating halfway would be serious. It can range from the spiritual energy of heaven and earth leaking out, to the severe consequences: a whole body of Tao Qi can be wiped out or dozens of years of Taoism can be damaged. Let's just talk about the dispersion of spiritual energy. Since ancient times, it is easy to release but difficult to recover. Every spell and magical power used is indeed throwing money out of the piggy bank. Separating the turbid and pure qi between heaven and earth requires a qi refiner to peel off the cocoon bit by bit. For those with high realms, it is naturally relatively easy. However, for lower-level qi refiners, this task alone will take countless hours. If there is no family education or guidance from a master, no magical treasures and spiritual weapons passed down by the master, and neither the location of the immortal ashram nor the harmony of people, of course you will hit the wall everywhere and practice will not go smoothly. Taking a side road, they only talk about cultivating one natal thing, and monks in the genealogy have ready-made cultivation procedures. Where can Shanzi Yeshio go to hear the Tao? If there is a teacher who teaches from teacher to teacher, that is called true transmission. If there is no guide, you will be confused for thousands of miles, and you will waste your time beating the wall. That is not the most terrifying thing. I am afraid that your practice will go astray and lead to a road of no return. Dead road. Refining and destroying a candidate natal object may be something that the genealogy cultivator can bear, but there is still something to replace it. For the wild dog-eating Yamazawa Yeshio, it may be the tragic end of the road being cut off. Therefore, Zongzitu Dojo will set up at least one mountain protecting formation. Different Dharma lineages, and each peak also has its own formation, layer by layer blessing, in order to hide the wind and water, gather the spiritual energy, and invisibly remove the filth in the world. Evil spirit. You must know that the operation of all large formations requires fairy money. This expenditure, if multiplied by the number of years, will be a large amount. This raises another crucial question, about whether the mountain protecting formation can absorb the spiritual energy of the surrounding heaven and earth. If the answer is to absorb it, then how big is the surrounding? Almost all sects in history have different choices. Are destined to be unable to avoid this issue that should not be made public. Generally speaking, two sects are more than thousands of miles apart. They are afraid of collision, just like rivers competing for water channels. Luo Lushan's choice was extremely conservative, just to seal the spiritual energy of heaven and earth without leaking, and not to use a large formation to swallow mountains and rivers with anger. The Longquan Sword sect, which was also on the border of Chuzhou, did the same thing. But even so, because the geographical location of the two sects was too close, as the saying goes, one mountain cannot tolerate two tigers, the Longquan Sword sect was still forced to move out, and in the outside world it seemed that Wan Qiong, the chief minister of the Dali royal family, had to take the initiative to make way for the young hermit official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi and had to avoid his edge. The Tiger King Weibo personally helped move the mountain, and the Song family of Dali, who was in the middle of the adjustment, also gave Wan Qiong a compensation and allocated a large piece of land on the boundary of the old Beiwei mountain of Dali to the Longquan Sword sect. In the eyes of other monks in Aquarius continent, all this is reasonable. There are even many rumors about people with noses and eyes. It is said that Master Qin Shanju, who met the dragon by chance, actually tried to find a place in the blacksmith shop when he was young, but was rejected by those with eyes above his head. Ruan Qiong looked down on him in every possible way, thinking that the poor boy had no qualifications for cultivation, and was unwilling to accept Qin Pingan as his disciple. The latter was disheartened and worked as a handyman for a few days, so Ruan Qiong simply drove him away. I don't know when, Aquarius Island began to secretly spread a few sayings. Don't be too Ruan Qiong when accepting disciples. Chief Ruan is a good judge of people. Let out the big leakage Ruan Jianxian. These humorous sayings were all told by Lu Xianying to Qin Pingan personally. At that time, Qin Pingan held it in for a long time and asked Master Ruan what he thought after hearing these remarks. Lu Xianying thought about it carefully and said that blacksmith Ruan's face was expressionless and his heart was calm. Explain. How can Qin Pingan explain this kind of thing? Should I explain it to Master Ruan, or to those in Aquarius continent who spread the news? Don't let me meet you talkative people in person, be careful. Taoist Ding asked cautiously, Senior, is your Taoist age very long? Xiago twitched his lips. I slept for a long time, and missed many things. I can't be considered a real Taoist. Why, if you are older and have a higher level than you will feel a little happier. Already. Taoist Ding shook his head and said, Xiao Dao would not think like this. Cultivation is my own business. Xiago followed the little Taoist priest's words and said, what a Taoist priest sees in his eyes is too focused on the things in front of him and the things at hand. What he sees in his heart is at most his own future, and he doesn't think too much about things other than the human body. The great way of heaven and earth, at least in my opinion, cannot be called a Taoist priest. It doesn't mean that you have to be a kind and good person, and that you have to crawl around in the world of mortals and walk again and again. It's just that now you Taoists, and Taoists have gone to various families and sections. The ancestors, coupled with the Taoist classics that can be easily turned over, all require their disciples and grandchildren to accumulate external skills. Some Taoist priests also propose something like 803,000 merits and virtues. There are thousands of Taoist traditions, each with its own merits. The one and the other waxes and wanes, honor and disgrace rise and fall, but since everyone looks at one thing this way and holds the same view, it is naturally because this thing is profitable. Do you understand what I really mean? Taoist Ding nodded and said, Senior, I understand what I mean. Xiago sneered, don't pretend to understand that you don't understand, just pretend to be like me. Taoist Ding said, how dare you? Xiago said casually, the reason why I am willing to talk to you a little more about Xiantian is that I feel that you are more similar to those Taoist priests in the past, but it is only relative. In those days, they regarded Taoism as more important than life. They endured humiliation and worked tirelessly. You can't imagine what it's like here. If you could hear one or two sentences from a senior Taoist, some people would fall to the ground. I couldn't afford it, I cried bitterly, and I didn't hide it. I not only worshipped the grace of the Master's preaching, but also worshipped the virtue of heaven and earth's upbringing. I also worshipped my Taoist heart, and I never felt guilty about the path behind me. You are not good enough. You are not pure enough. You don't really cry when you cry, you don't really laugh when you smile. You have all kinds of worries and thousands of calculations. You act like you are doing business with someone without knowing it. When Taoist Ding heard this, his expression was full of energy, his mind was swaying, and he yearned for it. Xiago glanced at the little Taoist priest, he was indeed a man of great talent. Taoist Ding thought seriously for a moment, and seemed to have some enlightenment. He raised his arm, extended a palm forward, raised it up, and then shook it gently. if there are sages who can be called moral people in the future, they can divide the heaven and the earth into yin and yang. For the time being, we forcefully name them as good and evil. The road is rugged and difficult to prove and difficult to obtain. Those who practice the good path may die young, and there are also those who practice the evil path who can climb high. This is the most deceptive method and deceives future generations of Taoists. However, those who are willing to count will know that many people succeed in the former, and many fail in the latter. Those who are new to Taoism and have fledgling years dare to say that they will definitely reach the top. Therefore, for the sake of caution, you need to follow the path of the former. Over time, you will be the first on the road. Those who hear the Tao will invisibly become the guardians of the disciples behind them. No matter how different the legal system is established on the Tao, and if there is another door set up by the roadside, the Tao will be bigger and wider, and there will be many people who are traveling together on the same Tao. Going to the top of the mountain and ascending to the sky with great force, the Taoist refining a certain old site with a pure Taoist heart. 100 people can't do it, but what about 1,000 people? 1,000 people are not enough, but 10,000 people are of the same mind. Our Taoist priests can really do this, unite as one, and tens of thousands of years later, the number of people, the momentum and the Tao lineage are as good as those of the battle to reach the sky 10,000 years ago. It can be broken and refined, turned into a city, or the ruins of the heavenly court can be overturned. Is it an extravagant hope? Why should the founders of the three religions worry about it for 10,000 years? Why bother? Disappear. Xiago said with a straight face and nodded slightly. It's okay for little Taoist priests. I haven't thought about it so much or so far. He has a much better mind than Yuan Jucai. No wonder the mountain owner favors him. Is he trying to poach someone? Yes, the calf's nose can be worshipped like a mountain of poverty, which is more than enough. A flawless Dharma image in green robes, the sword immortal turned into a rainbow light and swept out of the room, with his big sleeves swaying, the atmosphere was vast and the glaze was brilliant. In an instant, they were already more than 100 miles away from the mountains and rivers. There was a lingering sound in Taoist Ding's ears, and Mr. Chen said with a smile, "Wait a moment, and go back as soon as possible." Taoist Ding asked, "What is this? Is Mr. Chen practicing some secret technique?" Xiago curled his lips. Since there is no way for the yin shin to leave the body, let's find a similar method. A living person cannot be suffocated to death. Taoist Ding sincerely praised, "If you are surrounded by thousands of mountains and find your own path, you are talking about people like Mr. Chin." Xiago nodded, "Little Taoist priest, you are more suitable for Luola Mountain than the old deaf boy." Taoist Ding was shocked and said, "But that old deaf senior who is one of the 10 sword immortals of the great sword Chi Wall." Xiago rubbed his cheek. "Is the old deaf boy so famous? He insists on pretending to be humble and respectful to his predecessors. Could it be that this ordinary worshipper is not sincere?" Xiago remembered something. "Why do our mountain masters insist on insisting that you don't ask for Yu Xian's advice? Is it because you have something unspeakable and painful that you can't ask for Yu Xian's advice?" Taoist Ding hesitated for a while, but chose to speak sincerely about the matter. "I like to do everything without asking for help. Of course it is difficult to do so, so I settled for the next best thing. At the beginning of my practice, I set a framework for myself. For example, if I am blocked from climbing high in the future, I only pray to Yuhua Mountain once, and this time I used it before forming the elixir. I borrowed more than 200,000 talismans from Luqing to the Taoist temple of Taijian Blessed Land. I also allowed myself to pray to Patriarch Yu once in my life to break through the nascent soul realm. Bottleneck, since I can bypass my inner demons, I think I will use this opportunity before I retreat to enlightenment and ascend." Xiago said, "That's very good. It's not about saving face. It's not about asking for anything. It's just about being cautious. In this case, our mountain master, the dog, is meddling in other people's business with rats. Taoist Ding shook his head and said, Senior misunderstood Mr. Chen, but in fact Mr. Chen's intention was deeper. Regarding my 200 years of monastic life, he was very positive and praised me a lot. However, Mr. Chen also had a comment that hit the nail on the head. It made me sweat profusely on the spot, which will benefit me for a lifetime. Xiago would not be polite to him. Tell me that comment and listen to it. Taoist Ding took a deep breath and said slowly, Mr. Chen said that I have never been truly desperate, and have never truly come to a dead end where it is useless to pray for heaven, earth, others, or myself. So he asked me to think carefully and one day be there. What should I do, what will I think, and look back on what the path was like when I was born. Xiago rubbed his mink hat and said, You are not stupid. Do you have the answer right now? Dao Sherding said, There is no answer yet. But now I have several fresh ideas, and I will use multiple positive and negative arguments to verify the final argument. Xiago smiled and said, For example? Taoist Ding smiled and said, For example, the long river of time can flow back. When Patriarch Yu was filling the golden peak in Taofu Mountain, I would pack up my clothes and live outside Patriarch Yu's door, not to mention asking once. I would ask at least one question every day. Another example is when Patriarch Yu was filling in the golden peak. Beyond the stars, when I return to Yuhua Mountain, I will definitely carry a stack of amulets with me. When I go to the sky, I can not only ask for advice from my ancestor, but also overlook the human world among the bright stars, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Xiago nodded and said, You have finally figured it out. It turns out that what our mountain master calls begging and the begging in your heart are not the same concept at all. Taoist Ding nodded vigorously and said in a deep voice, That's true. While Taoist Ding was stuck on asking for help, Mr. Chen was teaching me asking for help. Mr. Chen taught me asking for help when he taught me asking for help. One thing. In my mind, preaching in the mountains has a high degree of truth in saving people. Teaching people how to fish is not as good as teaching them how to fish. That's it, that's it. Xiago whispered, Is there a possibility? I'm just saying it's possible. In fact, our mountain master hasn't thought so much about it. Taoist Ding said resolutely, Absolutely impossible. Xiago is surprised. You are a Taoist priest from Luola Mountain, so you are just facing Chen Pingon like this. Seeing the playful look on the senior's face, Taoist Ding looked confused and tentatively said, No way. Xiago looked embarrassed, put on his airs and lectured, The little Taoist priest is uneasy, how can he dare to preach outside the Taoist teachings? Our mountain master's good intentions in preaching to you have been greatly compromised. Taoist Ding smiled knowingly, put his hands in his sleeves, shrank his neck, and basked in the warm sun. Luola Mountain is such a wonderful place. Unknowingly, it captured people's hearts. Xiago laughed and said, It is not difficult to rebel and leave Yuhua Mountain. I will take a trip to Tianwai to see Yu Xian while I don't have to protect the mountain master. I will help you say a few good words and allow you to stay. Just practice Taoism in Luopa Mountain. For decades or hundreds of years, wait until one day you reach the Ascension Realm, then return to Yuhua Mountain. Then you can resume your Taoist priesthood and remain a guest in Luopa Mountain. Yu Xian's Taofu Mountain, it's like picking up an Ascension Realm in vain, and it's a big mistake. Taoist Ding said with a bitter look on his face, How can it be trivial to remove someone from the family tree of the Patriarch's Hall? Seniors are just joking. You should never do such a thing. Taoist Ding really couldn't do such things as deviant. My body is disciplined and my heart is free. This is the path Taoist Ding wants to walk. Xiago said lazily, 200-year-old Earth immortals were rare in our time. The little Taoist priest can stay here for a few more days and try to get acquainted with my Xiaomo. He and Luo Bao. I have a very good relationship with the master of Bixiao Cave in Tan. In the future, when you achieve enlightenment and ascend, and have the ability to travel to the lower reaches of Qingming world, you only need to say that you are a Taoist friend of my Xiaomo. But you can't say that, the master of Bixiao Cave is too narrow-minded. Shao, it's easy to hear this opening statement, and he will silence you with his sleeves. If you change your words and say that you are half a junior of Xiao Mo, the master of Bixiao Cave may be willing to chat with you for a few words about Taoism. Taoist Ding has roughly guessed the true, Taoist age of this girl in the mink hat. No wonder you can go to heaven if you want to go to heaven, and you can see your ancestor if you want to. No matter what you talk about, there are no taboos. When talking about the old temple master of Donghai Taoist Temple, you can also talk about it so lightly. Taoist Ding couldn't help but asked out of curiosity, Senior's Taoist companion, is he a Qi refiner of the same generation as him? Xiago grinned and said, the top 10 heroes in the ancient world, plus 4 candidates, total 14. Xiaomo and I have learned about half of them. This was the first time that Taoist Ding had heard about the top 10 rich men in the world. Even though it was the first time he heard about this, when ancient and world were combined, Taoist Ding knew the importance of the weight. He really couldn't imagine the realm of those 14 people. Taoist Ding asked from his heart, Senior, can you tell me who they are? Xiago waved his hand, I can say it, but you can't listen. Taoist Ding then asked in a roundabout way, dare I ask if the boss swordsman is one of the 10 giants in the ancient world? Xiago shook his head, Chen Qingdu was just one of the candidates at the time. He didn't practice swords fast enough. He has that kind of rare skill and has accumulated a lot of experience. Every step he takes is sure. Taoist Ding asked again, where is the Lixing? Xiago smiled and said, still one of the candidates. Taoist Ding took courage and said, where is the founder of the 3 religions? Is that possible? Xiago turned around and took a look. Daoshi Ding knew that he had gone astray. The founders of the 3 religions are among the top 10. The 4 candidates for the top 10 in the world are ranked in no particular order. Sword cultivator Chen Qingdu, the boss of the Sword Qi Great Wall. The young master was a guest, and later the ceremonial sage Haoran created writing and had unparalleled understanding of heaven and earth. Bai Zai was originally the most promising person to become the co-leader of the demon clan in the world. Mr. Fu Zonglis Sanshan Joho, his dojo was in Mount Tai, one of the 5 ancient mountains. Bai Jing once saw with his own eyes the detailed situation of Mr. Sanshan Joho preaching in the world. As for Chen Qingdu, at that time he was still a young man with thick eyebrows and big eyes and a Chinese character face. He was not handsome. In terms of appearance alone, compared to the old blind man's temple, he was probably hundreds of times inferior to Chen Pingon. When the battle to reach the sky was over, the master of Bixiao Cave, who stayed in Luobayan and refused to contribute, relied on his Taoism and imitated that of Naji Temple, forcibly encircling a large piece of land in the human world, taking it as his own, and practicing a Taoist temple seems to be named Kaizhou. Then name a place in a state Guandao Temple? As a result, Daozu was offended. Xiago Xiao asked, it is said that Yu Xian monopolizes the word talisman, why did Hadao go to the outside world? Yu Xian's disciple and grandson, haven't you ever thought about the reason? Taoist Ding nodded and said, I've thought about it, but I haven't figured it out yet. Xiago said, what's not clear about this? Naturally, there are Taoist priests occupying the road. Taoist Ding pointed at the sky and said, what this junior is confused about is that since the senior has such a high level of Taoism and succeeded in joining the Tao early, why didn't he just go to the sky to refine the stars and make a talisman? He did this. You juniors and backwards have no way to go. How can you talk about the unstoppable road? You will be trapped in a jar for 10,000 years and you won't be able to breathe at all. Xiago smiled and said, I will blame you to death. In fact, it was not only Yu Xian who was able to make great progress with this unique approach, but Wei Shi, the AI Aizhou, also benefited from the initiative of Mr. Sanshan Zhouho to give way, and had a chance to reach the 14th realm of Hedao. It is a pity that Wei Shi, who calls himself the master of 37 peaks, is not up to par, has poor moral ability, and has a poor chess move. After hearing Xiago's explanation, Taoist Ding suddenly realized that there really are Taoist priests who are willing to take the initiative to make way for future generations. There is one more expert in my heart. Taoist Ding stood up, walked down the steps, met Tianji, and paid a distant salute to the senior Fulu who still had no name or Taoist name. Xiago thought of something again and was so happy. The more she thought about it, the more fun she felt. She couldn't help but laugh out loud. She lay in the corridor, dangling her legs, Xiao Mo, go home quickly. Taoist Ding asked, Senior, may I ask where the dojo is located? Now that he has made up his mind to stay here for more time, Taoist Ding wants to have more contact with this senior. Even if he doesn't ask for Dharma, it would be good to ask more about the almanac of thousands of years ago. Xiago rolled his eyes and said, without a serious dojo, our Luopa mountain has never held an official peak opening ceremony. Since Xiaoma doesn't have his own mountain top, I will marry a chicken, follow a chicken, marry a dog, follow a dog, of course there will be no. Maybe the first person to receive this honor is the Taoist Xianwei who is guarding the gate at the foot of the mountain. After that, those in the nascent soul realm will follow suit. We, the mountain masters, are determined. Taoist Ding was speechless. The old deaf boy of Jinchi Great Wall, the senior in front of her, plus her Taoist companion. Mr. Chen's Luoluo Mountain, which has just received the title of sect, seems to be a bit crowded with the great monk standing on the top of the mountain. Xinwu Mountain. The originally sunny sky and earth were dark and unclear, as if the mountains were covered by layers of clouds and mist. Outside the mountain, a towering Dharma statue in a blue shirt carrying a sword walked towards the mountain in the air. Walking outside the gate archway of Xinwu Mountain, the sword immortal was already as tall as an ordinary person. Like a who travels around the world at night, shrinking into mountains and rivers, all kinds of things are unrestricted, and time is infinite. There was a middle-aged patriarch in the mountain. He walked out of the main hall and went down the mountain to entertain the guests. A reunion after so many years seems like it happened yesterday, so vividly in my mind. When the two sides meet, it is like unfolding a picture with the ink not yet dry. This middle-aged man, whose appearance and temperament seemed to have not changed at all, even his attire remained the same as before, with a sword on his back and a talisman hanging on his waist. He was the military monk who brought Ma Kuxuan out of Lizhu cave. He was Ma Kuxuan's nominal preacher and secret protector. Both parties had the status of master and disciple. As if he were in a time scroll, revisiting his old place hand in hand, the man looked around and said with a smile, "It's so lifelike that it's hard to distinguish between true and false." A boy with straw sandals who had a hard time surviving back then, with such good means. Now I have already asked Chen Jianxian of Xingyang Mountain, so I can say a few more words. There was no sign of turning a big deal into a trivial matter. Instead, he took the initiative to reveal the wedge of the conversation back then, without Chen Pingon needing to remind him. In the scroll, the location is the immortal tomb outside the town. The man explained his reasoning to the young man. You are not qualified to bargain. If you agree, just nod. If you don't agree, just keep silent. If you feel it's unfair and unwilling, and if you are lucky enough to escape from the old ape, then you can go to Xinwu Mountain when you leave the town. Come to me and ask for what you think is justice. There was no look of resentment on the young man's face, his eyes were bright, and he just replied, "If I have a chance, I will." As an outsider, Ma Kuxuan obviously wanted to say something at that time, but the man said something back: "A dead person is not qualified to speak harshly to a living person." At this moment, Chen Pingan's eyes were more on Ning Yao, and the mud-legged boy holding a short knife. In his opinion, he and Ning Yao were a perfect match. Slowly retracting his gaze, Chen Pingan let all the characters in the scroll temporarily leave the scene. With his hands in his sleeves, they spread out over the tombs of the gods that had not been converted into temples by the Great Li dynasty. He smiled and said, "Senior's words back then, intuitively, I can hear them. He didn't mean any harm to me. But to be honest, I didn't understand this principle at first. During the subsequent trips, I thought about it over and over again and chewed it, and it left a lot of aftertaste." The man walked aside and said frankly and honestly, "At most, I have no hostility towards you. But I can't say that I have any goodwill. I was just afraid that you were young, especially with the woman you like watching, and you would be a passionate person easily." The superiors acted impulsively, and missed their way before they really grew up. They stumbled here, which led to a deeper grudge between you and me. A certain ancestor of Jinwu Mountain made things difficult for a junior in his own territory. This kind of thing would not be spread out. Not nice. He did notice very early on that Chen Pingan had a fighting spirit. Chen Pingan thought to himself and said, "Senior is a military master who has cultivated his mind and strength. Therefore, he is in the mountains and looks outside the mountains. The gods in the above 5 realms also have no ill intentions towards the mortal Chen Pingan. Unless he is on the battlefield, only then would I be hostile to anyone. The immortal tomb where I fought with Ma Kuxuan was not the battlefield of my predecessors, so there was no murderous intention, let alone the slightest intention to kill. I didn't even hesitate. If I hadn't defeated Ma Kuxuan, but Ma Kuxuan is better than me. If he wants to kill me again, Senior will stop him." The man nodded, "I will stop you from killing him, and I will also stop him from killing you. I am partial to Ma Kuxuan because of my status as a mountain sect. At the same time, I will not be too partial to him. It is due to my personal personality and I am not allowed to do so. Do what is necessary." At this point, the man's expression became strange. He came with a strong momentum and brought up the old things again. Could it be that this is not an attack on the enemy? He couldn't be here to thank me, right? Chen Pingan was still talking to himself, but I don't know if the seniors are aware of it. Huan Shu still harbors an invisible malice without knowing it. It was the first time that Chen Pingan called him by his first name. The man suppressed his smile and said, "I would like to hear the details and help me solve my doubts. I don't know the true face of heaven and earth, just because I am in the world of mortals." Looking at his posture, does Chen Jianxian want to be polite first and then attack? Huan Shu found that Chen Pingan just looked at him with a smile, hinting to himself that since the answer to the mystery lies with him, he is the one who can answer the bell. Chen Pingan's thoughts suddenly changed. Huan Shu had a high seniority in Jinwu Mountain. It was said that he was the younger brother of the contemporary Mountain Mastery wedding. However, apart from Huan Shu's experience in Jinwu Mountain, Huan Shu's origins were the same. The regiment was so foggy that there was no record even of the Dali intelligence, only a concise comment that this person came from the ancestral family of the Central and Eastern military dynasty. Because he has a good senior brother, and also met the first ancestor of the military strategist again, Jinwu Mountain has a spare time. More than just wandering thousands of miles, Chen Pingan chose to imprison the gods by forgetting key words and personnel. Sex is often something that is temporarily remembered after seeing or hearing something as a key word that opens a certain key to the door. So what I am thinking about at the moment is the Sui Chu Gong Wu Shuangjiang, and then extending all the way, there are still Ai Ai Zhou Wei Shi, whom Wushuangjiang had tidied up once. These thoughts were like catching a series of fish, and the branches were overgrown, and the fire started a prairie fire. They were completely involuntary, and Chen Pingan could only think of them, and they had to start them all again one by one. Self-destruction thoughts. Huan Shu suddenly said, "Yes. That's it. There are indeed 3 types of malicious words from people. The first type, such as the bad words in the market, is the most obvious. The second type is more subtle and does not need to be used in words at all. The content and wording are focused on, but it is a kind of class overlooking and scorning the lower and lower classes." Chen Shan's previous evaluation was to be polite. "I, a real military monk from Wushan, have nothing to do with Chen Pingxiang." When Pingyan said those words, he was in this situation. The last one is indeed hidden and difficult to realize. Because it already comes from the one-sided world that Huan Shu lives in, and the invisible malice towards Chen Pingan's one-sided world. At this point, both sides I believe that words are no longer needed, no one needs to speak, there is a world of difference, good and evil are self-evident. From the speaker, from the class of the speaker, from the whole world. The man kept mumbling to himself, falling into a mysterious state of asking himself, "Does the Tao belong to me? Does the Tao belong to you?" The road lies in the pure blue sky, among the muddy loess. Unknowingly, by the time Huan Shu came to his senses, Chen Pingan had already removed the formation, and the 2 of them were standing at the gate of the mountain. Chen Pingan waited until Huan Shu escaped from that realm, then turned around and left. Chen Pingan could even tell the difference between Ma Kuxuan and Ma Lanhua. How could he not be able to distinguish between him and Ma Kuxuan, or between Ma Kuxuan and Zhenwushan and the evangelist Huan Shu? What's more, Ma Kuxuan also took the initiative to leave the Jinwu mountain genealogy before going down the mountain. Even an awkward person like Ma Kuxuan, who always likes to without wiping his buttocks, is willing to act in such an abnormal way. This shows that Ma Kuxuan has deep feelings for this sect. Men, in fact, have feelings for his master Huan Shu. Huan Shu asked, "Have you finished speaking the truth of Shanju Qin? Are you leaving? Otherwise?" Huan Shu didn't talk much back then, just a few words, a total of 84 words. Chen Pingan asked back, "I am now in a higher realm than you, and my fists are harder than yours. I just want to say a few more words, so that you have to patiently listen to me finish the total of 264 words. I have to take a step back and say, if you don't think this way, think otherwise. If you want to settle old scores without mercy, what kind of justice do you really want to ask for? How can Huan Shu of Jinwu Mountain give Chen Pingan? In this case, after reminiscing about the past, come here with a satisfied heart and return with a satisfied mood." Unexpectedly, Huan Shu said, "Don't leave in a hurry. The mountain master has been waiting for you to climb the mountain as a guest for more than a day or 2. Chen Pingan smiled half-heartedly. "Don't you want to have a dog-fighting session behind closed doors, right?" Huan Shu laughed dumbly, shook his head, and explained without any hesitation, "My nephew of the mountain master wants to discuss a scandalous matter with the mountain master Qin." Now it was Chen Pingan's turn to be surprised. "Are you Huan Shu so senior? Especially the person whose true body statue is qualified to worship in the east and west of the ancestral home of the Tubing family and enjoy incense? No wonder it was this person who went to Lizhu Cave Heaven to take away the tokens of military strategists from the 3 religions and 1 family, and not the current mountain master of Jinwu Mountain or Fengshua Temple." Huan Shu said with a smile, "What kind of temperament does Ma Kuxuan have? You and he are from the same hometown, but you still don't know. If his seniority in the mountains were higher, he would be in trouble. Although Aquarius continent is the smallest of the 9 continents, it is the only big continent where 2 military ancestral courts stand at the same time. The mountain master of Fengshua Temple is a swordsman who likes to wield swords. He looks like a child, has deep eyes, and has an extremely powerful Tao Chi. The owner of Jinwu Mountain, named Yueding, is a man of medium height and plain appearance. Yu Ding appeared at the foot of the mountain, clasped his fists in salute and said with a smile, "I have met Master Qin, my great-uncle Master Huan." Chen Pingan glanced at Huan Shu. Huan Shu glared at Yueding. Yu Ding knew that there was something wrong, but he saw that his uncle and Chen Pingan were having a good chat, so he thought there was no need to hide your true seniority. Huan Shu said, "I have already been brought to you, so I will go to the Patriarch's hole. If you have something to do recently, please don't disturb me." Yu Ding saluted again, "I will obey the decree of the law. I respectfully send my uncle back to the palace to light the lamp." On the other side of the mountain gate archway, a young female cultivator came. Her face and demeanor were somewhat similar to Yueding's. Chen Pingan did not move to climb the mountain and asked, "Master Yueshan, what do you want to discuss?" "I need to go back to the mountain immediately to entertain guests, so I will stay soon." Yu Ding said, "Master Chen himself is a swordsman, and he has a sect under Luopa Mountain, which is a swordsmanship sect." Chen Pingan nodded and said, "Fellow snow monkey, you are well informed." Yu Ding really couldn't accept these words for a while. The woman on the other side of the mountain gate couldn't help laughing. "Shanju Chen is indeed funny, is he just talking nonsense like this? Nowadays, not to mention Aquarius continent, but also the entire Haran world, no one knows who." Not long after the young hidden official returned to his hometown, he established the upper and lower sects one after another. If this is considered well-informed, then if I can say a few more words later, I must be a learned person because I know so much about Luola Mountain and Jianqi Great Wall. It seems that some of the rumors on the top of the mountain are true. The young Hamid official has been sitting in the summer palace for many years and has accumulated baskets of flying swords, filled with strange yin and yang energy. Chen Pingan didn't squint his eyes and turned a deaf ear. Yu Ding said helplessly, "Don't be rude." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "To practice Taoism in the mountains, you must have a true temperament, which is much better than having a calculation in your heart. With family education and etiquette, just let your nature stretch and grow naturally, you are the embryo of Taoism." Yu Ding smiled and nodded. The woman lamented, but she was actually older. Yu Ding said sternly, "Limited by my natural strength and acquired academic ability, I am not very outstanding, so I have been stagnant at the first level of the Jade Pu realm for many years. But being able to reach the bottleneck of the Yu Pu realm is not the accumulation of my own Tao power. So, thanks to the delay in the spring of a certain year, the speed of refining the flying sword is more than twice the result with half the effort. In addition, in recent years, a piece of dragon-slaying platform cut from Longji Mountain, day and night I continued to sharpen my sword, and finally there were signs of retreat. Therefore, before the retreat, if Master Qin does not come to Jinwu Mountain as a guest, I will go to Luopa Mountain and take the initiative to talk to Master Qin about this matter and express my gratitude." Chen Pingan's expression relaxed, he was silent for a moment, nodded and said, "I see. Yu Jianxian is interested. The contemporary peak of Jinwu Mountain is named Snow Monkey. He is not only a military monk, but also a swordsman. It is said that his natal flying sword is called Hua Xinfeng. When it comes to flower letters, there are two ways to classify them in the world, the 12 flower trade winds, or the 24 categories. The former has a small number, but its meaning is greater. The latter seems to have a larger number, but in fact it is relatively narrower. According to Yu Ding's statement, it is inferred that the natal magical power of his flying sword, Hua Xinfeng, involves the latter. Yu Ding continued, "We, Jinwu Mountain, are willing to give up half of the Longji Mountain sword sharpening stones to make a deal with Luopa Mountain. To be honest, Dali Longji Mountain belongs to our Jinwu Mountain share. Calculated in 10 parts, 2 of them it was completed and sent to the ancestral court of Middle-earth. 6 people including me, Uncle Juan, etc., either needed to repair the ancestral hall, or we needed to refine our own swords, or we needed to repay some favors on the mountain, so a total of 20% was shared, and another 20%, after discussion at the Patriarch Hall, are ready to be included in Jinwu Mountain's treasury, and it will not be touched for the time being. Therefore, there are still 40% of sword-sharpening stones left on Longji Mountain, which have not yet been dug into the mountain. Chen Pingan immediately reached out and put Master Yushan's arm on his arm. Let's talk slowly when we go up the mountain. We can wait a while before returning to the mountain to entertain guests. The two sides looked at each other, both in silence. In fact, both parties were relieved. One is the unexpected joy that this matter is actually discussed. The other one was even more relieved. Master Chen Shan did not immediately turn his back and disown anyone just because he had just become the Grand Master of Dali. Otherwise, Master Chen would not have to go out personally. All he had to do was ask the Dali court to send someone to inquire with Zenrishin. Is there any surplus for sending sword grinding stones? In the previous discussions at the Ancestral Hall, no one hesitated to suggest that it would be better to mine Longji Mountain as soon as possible, and then discuss with the Zhongtu Ancestral Court to keep it on their behalf. In this way, even if he, Chen Pingan, becomes the national master, he would not be able to tear up the contract signed by Cui Han himself and immediately seal Longji Mountain, and then go to the Jinwu Mountain Lion to ask for all the sword-sharpening stones that have not been mined from the mountain. Hearing this suggestion that sounded good but was actually extremely lame, Wedding felt powerless. Lola Mountain was only a few steps away from Longji Mountain. Even if he could pretend to turn a blind eye to the stealing of quarrying stones under Chen Pingan's nose, would the Emperor of the Great Li Dynasty really sit back and watch? I really won't complain in my heart. I finally invited Chen Pingan to serve as the national master. Is this how your Zenwishin congratulates me, the Song family of Dali? What's more, as far as Yu Ding is concerned, he is willing to make a long-term deal with Luo Peshan that will benefit both parties, both in public and private matters, and in terms of emotions and reasons. Chen Pingan held hands with the master of Mount Yu and climbed up the stairs together. Chen Pingan praised, the remaining 40% of Longji Mountain is given to Luopa Mountain. Fellow Daoist Yu's spirit is already that of an immortal. Yu Ding was a little confused. Did I say that all the sword-sharpening stones should be given to Master Qin? The result of the previous discussion at the Ancestral Master Hall was to give Luo Luoshan 20%. If the new Imperial Master is still not satisfied, at most, he will give another 10%. Give it all. Lord Yu Mountain, you can step down as the Mountain Lord. According to Chen Pingan's idea, being able to purchase 20% of the sword-sharpening stones from Jinwu Mountain would be considered a worthwhile trip. Don't say it's just a trip to the mountain as a guest. It's no problem for me to go to the kitchen, put on an apron and cook a few dishes to go with the wine by Master Yu. Yu Ding didn't know that Shanju Qin was used to being the boss of Bao Fengzai and the second shopkeeper. He just turned to look at the female cultivator beside him, and she actually nodded. Dad, you just said it yourself, you gave me everything. When Yu Ding heard this, he didn't feel any sentimentality about the female student's failure, and he didn't think that she was turning her arms outward. Instead, he thought about it seriously. Chen Pingan was a little curious, so he turned to look at her. He didn't take his father's surname, it seems he was named Song Jing. Since he did not go down the mountain to practice and rush to the battlefield, there is no record in the files of the Dali Criminal Department. I have a guess. Based on the apparent background of Jinwu Mountain and the secret files of the Dali dynasty, the mining of Longji Mountain will not be so fast. Now only 40% of the sword-sharpening stones are left. There must be experts to help. Help cut the dragon-slaying platform. She smiled and said, Chen Yingguan, I am also a sword cultivator. I secretly went to the Sword Chi Great Wall. But before I went, I swore in the Patriarch Hall not to pass the sword, so my trip was in vain. Chen Pingan nodded and asked with a smile, I would like to ask, is it a single-character flying sword? She said with surprise on her face, you can guess all this, Chen Yingguan is really a god. Every single-character flying sword in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, as long as there is one holder of this kind of flying sword, it will be a top priority in the files of the Summer Palace. The Great Wall of Sword Qi will definitely arrange 2 or even more. S. Guardian. Just like Yueting's natal flying sword, Flower Trade Wind, if it is not the 24th but the 12th Flower Trade Winds, then Yueting's swordsmanship achievements can be even higher. In the same way, if it is Yueting's natal flying sword, is it the legendary single-character flying sword, such as Flower? The avenue is wide, as you can imagine. However, the number of such single-character flying swords in history is too rare. Even in the Great Wall of Sword Qi, only 14 have been recorded in the past 10,000 years. Fijian's real name has a large number of characters, which does not necessarily mean it has a low grade. For example, Chen Pingan's Caged Bird and The Moon in the Well, as well as Lu Jinglong's Fijian's tentative rules, are both very high. But as long as it is a single-character flying sword, it must be of extremely high quality. Because this allows sword cultivators to do no hard work in refining energy, cross any barriers, and practice Taoism, it is equivalent to possessing a natal character of a Confucian sage. Yu Ding smiled and said, her name was given by Grandmaster Jiang with help. The pride of my parents is beyond words. Song Jing asked, can you guess which word it is? Chen Pingan said calmly, how can you guess this? Song Jing had a small regret. Chen Pingan had already turned to talk to her father about business. Jing is the name of an ancient star. Since it was Taigong Jiang of the martial arts temple who personally bestowed the name, it naturally has a profound meaning. Since ancient times, military strategists have attached great importance to changes in celestial phenomena. It is recorded in the Yuling chapter of the Book of Rites that in the month of Jichuan, the sun is in the arc of Qihun. There is a cloud in the Tianguan astrology book that the arc 9 star is in the southeast of the wolf, and the bow of the sky is used to cut down the rebels and Huayuan. In addition, the sage's interpretation of the word has annotations, and the arc is the reason why the banner is spread. So what else do you need to guess about the name of Song Jing's flying sword? It's just the word arc. Then she used her natal flying sword to cut the dragon-slaying platform, which could not only help Jinwu Mountain quarry stones faster, but also be the most effective sword refining method. No wonder she dared to express her opinion on such a major sect matter, and Yu Ding didn't think so. She's messing around. Slowly climbing up the main Shinto road of Jinwu Mountain, the top of the mountain made 3 demands. One was to choose an auspicious day for Jinwu Mountain to formally conclude an alliance with Luolu Mountain and the Qingping Sword Sect. Second, the sword cultivators and warriors of Jinwu Mountain can go to the 2 sects to practice, and vice versa. As for the number of people, if the discussion cannot be done today, we can discuss it in detail later. Third, when the colorful world opens again, Zenwushan is going to select 6 to 9 people. They will rush to the colorful world in the future, hoping to stay in Feishing City for a while before going out. Longquan Sword Sect and Fengshua Temple, since the Longji Mountain that belongs to them has long been exhausted and has been hollowed out, the Qi practitioners who have stayed in the mountains there to practice in the past few years are actually just showing off. According to the contract jointly signed by the 4 parties, after any force has completed mining, it must withdraw from the Longji Mountain boundary. The time limit of the land deed shall be based on this. It's just that Wanqiong and Fengshua Temple each have a tacit understanding and have their own concerns and considerations. In short, neither party has reported truthfully to the Dali court. Even if Zenwushan is aware of it, there is no need to please Dali on this matter. The Li Song clan had bad relations with Longquan Sword Sect and Fengshua Temple. So once the agreement between Jinwu Mountain and Luopa Mountain is finalized today, the Dragon's Back Mountain will be completely taken over by Luopa Mountain. After going round and round, I finally realized that this mountain is my Chen Pin Gan's, after I had longed for it but couldn't get it. Of course, Chen Pin Gan agreed to the previous two conditions that were not conditions at all without any hesitation, but on the third point, Chen Pin Gan said that he must discuss it with Ascension City first. Looking at the young hidden official who started talking nonsense again in a serious manner, Song Jing had a hard time holding back his laughter. Who doesn't know that at the Summer Palace in Feishing City, Ning Yao is just helping someone take on the post of hidden official? Then who did you, Chen Pin Gan, discuss with, and where did you discuss with your wife? But to be honest, even Chen Pin Gan's mother, Bea Pingzu, when talking about his Taoist couple, always said that Chen Pin Gan had a higher regard for Ning Yao. If he really wanted to become a Taoist couple, she would marry down. Song Jing just didn't think so. There was no need to climb high or get married. The two of them were just a good match made by God. When he opened a shop on the Jianqi Great Wall, Chen Pin Gan just drank some wine and went home late, but Ning Yao was willing to close the shop. All nonsense. Not sure if it was an illusion, but Song Jing found that Chen Pin Gan turned to look at him again, with a kind smile, like the eyes of an elder looking at his nephew, happy and kind. Yu Ding speeded up his pace intentionally or unintentionally, and just stood between the two of them. Master Chen Shan, let's talk business, let's talk business. You must not be the protagonist of that certain landscape travel book. Now that the agreement was roughly settled, Chen Pin Gan had to rush back to Fiolu, and Yue Ding had no intention of staying. It's strange, it's like guarding against thieves. Chen Pin Gan was confused. A grain of mustard seed transformed into a Dharma form, flying in the wind and returning to Fiola Taoist Temple. Chen Pin Gan opened the door and walked out of the room. Probably because he was in a good mood, his sleeves were fluttering. It is rare for Qin Shanju, who has always walked calmly, to have such a heroic pace and conceited air. Then he had a quarrel with Taoist Ding, which almost made Taoist Ding have to seal his peace. Fellow Taoist, I have just realized an ascension method that can be called a master's method at a very small level. Do you want to learn it? Do you dare to learn it? As soon as this question came out, there was silence. It was so cold. Chen Jianxian was in high spirits and Taoist Ding was dumbfounded. Xiago was the first to break the silence and asked in a low voice, "Mountain Master, are you drunk?" A conscientious genealogist jumped out of nowhere, squatted there, spread out a blank book, and prepared to write down the matter. There is that chapter title. Chen Junkai has reached the realm of immortals, but he can teach the method of ascension. Sword of Coming Chapter 1234. Chapter 1234 Pure Sword Cultivators. It was strange that Chen Pin Gan, who was so bold in his words, then just asked Taoist Ding some basic common sense. When did you go fast? Before that, you had 3 meals a day irregularly. When did you reach a certain state on the path of spiritual practice? Do you still remember the specific year, month and day, and the details of breathing in different states and the big and small heavens? Condition. Not to mention Taoist Ding, even Xiago didn't bother to pretend to understand. She really didn't understand what the mountain master was thinking. If you really want to preach and save people and confer a so-called ascension method, how can you, Chen Pin Gan, find another way to be so rustic? The genealogy compiler recorded everything in the book. No matter how much the white-haired boy admired the ancestor Yingguan, he couldn't help but curse a few words in his heart. It was good that she got the title of this chapter, but the content was too clear. Too dry. Chen Pin Gan asked a lot of unbearable details, and finally asked, "Fellow Taoist Ding, have you thought about it? Taoist Ding was an honest man and asked, with this method of ascension, why doesn't Mr. Chen practice this method himself? The white-haired boy squatting aside and pecking at the rice was a good question. Chen Pingon smiled and said, I need to watch and protect the Tao from the sidelines. Xiago gave a thumbs up to the mountain owner, be consistent in words and deeds, and treat others with sincerity. Taoist Ding said, think about it, let's take a gamble. Chen Pingon narrowed his eyes and smiled and said, you stay here first and practice as usual for a few days. Don't be nervous. Just keep everything as usual and do whatever you want. After that, I will make a joint venture with my Taoist friends. Dao Shi Ding took a deep breath. I heard Xiago sigh and remind him, what's going on with the little Taoist priest? He forgot about it as soon as he said it, so he lost his focus. Chen Pingon went to the sword worship platform and personally carved a book seal for Bai Xian to congratulate him on his successful breakthrough. The seal is, floating clouds take the mountains to the blue sky, and the name of the boy's flying sword is Yunyu. Chen Pingon said, over there in Jinwu Mountain, I met a sword cultivator with a single-character flying sword. The old deaf boy smiled and said, it's rare, it's really rare. Bai Xian asked curiously, Master Chow, single-character flying sword. What does it mean? The old deaf man explained, for example, the titles of kings are also divided into levels, and most of them are two-character titles. For example, Song Mu, the king of Luo who accompanied the capital of Dali, is the so-called one-character king in the romance novel, which is better than the two-character title. Ziwang is more valuable. Bai Xian asked doubtfully, doesn't Zhong Yuan have a natal flying sword? Its name is 4 characters. Isn't it also very strong and unreasonable? The old deaf boy laughed and said, let's talk about common sense first, and then special cases. For example, the old deaf child once saw a single-character flying sword. The old deaf boy hesitated for a moment and asked, Master Yin Guan, do you have statistics on the Summer Palace? Chen Pingon nodded and said, only 14 are recorded. The old deaf boy said, what a pity. There are 2 meanings. One is that it is a pity that the owners of these flying swords seem to be the ones with the highest realm, and they are the sword immortals. No one can successfully reach the ascension realm. The second is some natal flying swords with single-character flying sword qualifications. Their owners died too early in the battle, fell too quickly, or had no time to improve their ranks, or had no time to break certain restrictions, and were unable to have magical powers. However, he succeeded in becoming a single-character flying sword. The old deaf boy asked, is it possible? Chen Pingon said, just like the number of monks in the 14th realm, there should be more and more sword cultivators with single-character flying swords. The old deaf child frowned and sighed, the sun and the moon have passed away, and I am not with you. Chen Pingon remained silent. From last year to now, Chen Pingon has been worried about Fuyuzhou. After returning to Houran Tianxia, among the foreign sword cultivators who stayed at the Summer Palace, they only met Lin Junbai and Dang Liang. There was Xiao Mo beside him. After he was completely relieved about Xiao Mo, Xiago came. After he was also relieved about Xiago, Xiao Mo went to Qingming Tianxia. He needed to retreat again, so Xiago helped to protect him. Xiago seemed to have noticed the mountain owner's worry, and said with a smile, I've sneaked over to Fuyao Island before, and it's not a big deal. If you are really worried, just ask Gontang to go there and keep an eye on it. Well, he is idle anyway. What? The old deaf child's heart tightened. Going to work again. A pair of old eyes that have seen the old mountains and rivers, but cannot see the shocking new mountains and rivers, cannot hear the words that the city is springy and the trees are deep, the old people are easily heartbroken. In the vast world, after a battle is won, the most tragic battle is actually in Fuyasu. Of course, it was also very tragic on the Aquarius continent, but the Song family of Dali at least preserved half of the continent's mountains and rivers. Tongisao. Apart from a handful of sects on the mountain, how many battles have been fought at the foot of the mountain? Therefore, on the territory of Fuyao continent, various places have restored their country one after another, and they are all using brand new reformed year names. It has only been 3 years since the Jinpu dynasty was restored to Zhua. At the end of winter last year, at the Jinchi ferry built in Luanjiaden, at night, sword lights suddenly appeared in the Xianjia Inn at the ferry, all heading towards Chuanjiao. Rush to the mountain. Streams of bright sword light cut through the night sky, dragging streaks of fireflies in the sky, which attracted everyone's attention along the way. Just the famous sword immortals who were recognized at a glance include Xie Songhua from Aizu, Songpin from Jinjiazu, Yu from Lixiazu, Puha, and Situ Jiyu. In addition, there are several famous nascent Soul Realm old swordsmen, who are now well-deserved big shots in the 3 northwest continents of Hauran where many great monks have died. And beside these sword immortals, there are also a group of young people who are skilled in handling swords. They are so young that they are dazzling. Apart from sword cultivators, I'm afraid there won't be another type of chi practitioner in the world who can make others feel that the word young has such weight. The purpose of this meeting was not to make money, nor to wade into troubled waters, but to prevent someone from using secret methods to destroy the mineral veins, which would affect the entire Fuyao continent veins and cause dozens of nearby countries to instantly. Lu Shen. Sitijiu asked, is it really possible that that vein of temporarily unknown material could become a brand new kind of fairy money? Except for Snowflower, Xiaoshu, and Guyuqian, these 3 kinds of mountain fairy money have historically appeared in jade mines that naturally contain spiritual energy. However, the final facts have proved that because those jade stones are not pure enough and the spiritual energy is not evenly distributed, they are not good enough. The level of casting is standard money. After all, if every piece of money cannot be equivalent, how can it be circulated? Furthermore, the ultimate reserves of those types of jade are also a big problem. Therefore, those mineral veins are at most occupied, mined and tempered by one or several sects, and become the basic materials for refining spiritual weapons and magic weapons on the mountain, or are made into certain kinds of money. Some sects have become famous for this reason. With Xiaozong, the latter's duty is to guard the mountain. In fact, Situ Jiyu, as a sword cultivator in the Jade Purity realm, has been practicing since he was young, and has no worries about food and clothing. He is not interested in making money. He just feels that the atmosphere is boring when he wields a sword in silence, so he casually brings up a topic to chat. A few words. As a result, no one spoke to him at all, and Situ Jiyu was completely bored. Elsewhere, a Jade Purity sword immortal took the initiative to start the conversation, and immediately followed him with a few words of flattery, which was simply outrageous. Situ Jiyu's biggest problem now is that he was unable to take 1 or 2 children from the Sword Chi Great Wall and accept him as a disciple. So looking at the younger ones in the team, Situ Jiyu liked everyone. Looking at those old people, Situ Jiyu looked like they were an eyesore to everyone. Strange things come and go, but I still have to blame the young hidden official for not treating him as his best friend. The drinks were all wasted. In Ai Aizhou, the female swordsman Xie Songhua once cooperated with the young hermit officer to kill the Jade Pu realm monster clan. Because the beast was a sword cultivator, it was relatively valuable and its military exploits were unusual. In the Great Wall of Sword Chi, she didn't pass the sword many times, but she made great achievements in battle. According to the rules of the Great Sword Chi Wall, it is equivalent to killing an immortal monster. Since he was not good at making money, and sword cultivation was the most expensive profession, there was always a way to make a fortune if he was alone. But now that he had accepted 2 disciples, Xia Songhua became the Lu family of Aai. The blame is on the money given by Lu Kaishin. It was too much. Situ Jiu held it in for a long time, and finally couldn't help but said, Xia Songhua, why are you willing to be worshipped by others? It's hard to learn from Yu Yu. Yu Yu had a lot of offerings and the title of guest minister, and he just collected money every year. If he doesn't do his job properly, it's no wonder he's not good at swordsmanship. Xia Songhua said angrily, I didn't even ask Lu Kaishin if he would take a concubine. I'm already brave enough. Yu Yu said helplessly, what are you doing with me? Situ Jiu sneered and said, based on the merits of the battle, you have to wield the sword under my feet. Yu Yu laughed. Pooh, he purred, the 2 chickens are pecking each other. Xia Songhua laughed and said, 3 chickens in 1 cage. Pooh, he thought in vain, not daring to say anything. He and Situ Jiu had exactly the same experience. They were brothers in need. One was a genealogy monk who was even more of a wild cultivator than a wild cultivator, and the other was once the patriarch of the Divine Continent sect Situ Xianfu in Middle-earth. Due to an accident, he lost his life. According to his genealogical identity, he became a wild cultivator. They all felt that they wanted to learn the swordsmanship of Jianqi Great Wall, and then they all stayed at Jianqi Great Wall, based on their ability. They all killed monsters in foreign lands and made meritorious deeds, and they were all related to each other in the Summer Palace. They were considered to have helped Yingguan, a lineage of sword cultivators. Now that they have returned to Haoran Tianxia, everyone is sarcastic towards you, feeling that Yu is not worthy of being named as a memorial to the Luoluo mountain. Song Pin, who doesn't like to talk, is holding his sword in the sky. The sky wind blows the green hair on his temples, fluttering like a goddess. Song Pin, a female swordsman from Jinjiazu, and Puha from Lixiazu, these 2, neighbor, swordsmen, both appeared in Chunfan's High of Hanging Mountain. Before that, they actually had no interaction with the young hermit official. As for the foreign female sword cultivators who appeared on the Great Wall of Sword Qi, their sword-playing styles were almost modeled after the same model. Be it Xia Songhua, Song Pin, or Li Kai, they were extremely decisive and ruthless on the battlefield. Before going to the Sword Qi Great Wall, Situ Jiu was a wild cultivator between Jinjia Continent and Liuxia Continent. On the contrary, he was the only one among the Haoran sword immortals back then who was a regular patron of a wine shop in the Sword Qi Great Wall. He liked to squat on the streets. While drinking, eat a bowl of Yangchun noodles. In terms of accumulated military exploits, Situ Jiu was actually only slightly inferior to Song Pin and not inferior to Pu He at all. However, he only lost to Pu He and was scolded by Pu Lauer for fishing. Situ Jiu didn't even know how to talk back. Damn it, Yin Guan wasn't there. Otherwise, Chen Pingan had no reason not to favor him because of his personal friendship with the young Yin Guan. Although everyone was a bartender, but aren't there different levels of wine trays? Situ Jiu and the Longbeard immortal lord of Delongqiu of the Middle-earth sect, and Situ Mengjing who went to Shao Longqiu of Tongya Continent to be some kind of mountain master, must be half-relatives. I received a secret letter not long ago. In the letter, Situ Mengjing roughly told the incident of Shao Longqiu. Speaking of the young hermit official, Situ Mengjing gave a high evaluation. There is no false reputation under the reputation. This mineral vein, which is said to be able to be made into the 4th kind of fairy money on the mountain, and then attract the covetousness of all forces, is located very deep underground, like a maze. At the entrance, there was once a dojo of a small mountaintop fairy mansion. This small sect has long been in existence. During the war, there were several genealogical monks who claimed to be direct descendants of the patriarch Hall. They had been complaining to the Jin Pu dynasty for the past 2 years. However, the Ministry of Punishments teamed up with the Academy to investigate carefully and found that they were just a few swindlers. Went to jail. The earliest discovery of this mineral vein was due to the sudden changes in the weather in the world. A monk who had some experience in the art of looking at the air accidentally bumped into the Chuanjiao mountain, which was originally unknown. He saw a purple thing at the entrance of the cave. The blue color was swirling around and condensed like a huge Ganoderma lucidum. He felt that there might be a priceless treasure about to appear, so he plucked up the courage to go into the cave to find out. As a result, he went deeper and deeper, and finally he saw a scene at the end of the road. This Sevuing realm Qi practitioner was stunned. In the vast, extremely empty cave, there was a dark earth vein made of unknown jade and stone, like a black dragon crawling on the ground, and its body was inextricably linked to the cave. The stone walls are connected together, as if they are imprisoned by the mountain, so it is impossible to imagine how long this mountain range is. The old monk tried all his methods and means, but he couldn't chop, smash, or figure out anything from the black dragon body. He consumed a lot of spiritual energy and talismans in vain, and jumped in a hurry. He really thought he was sitting on a treasure mountain, but he was empty-handed. What's the end of return? The old monk thought about it, but he didn't dare or didn't want to leak the news, so he had to leave and found a few trustworthy good friends on the mountain. They came here together to get the treasure. Unexpectedly, the Dragon Gate Realm sword cultivator used the flying sword. Worked hard, and only managed to cut off a piece of black jade the size of a palm, which was not enough to temper and repair the flying sword. The allies who came in high spirits were helpless one by one, just staring at each other with big eyes and small eyes. No one is willing to give up, but no one can think of a perfect solution. In the end, they came up with a solution that was not a solution. The brothers should stop forming an alliance and just establish a sect here. They must guard this inexhaustible treasure. It can be said that this is the foundation of a future sect, and you can even think about it even bigger. How did the Liu family in Azu become successful? Isn't it because of the snowy money vein? It's a pity that there is no airtight wall in the world. A Xianjia ferry was soon built outside the entrance of Chuanjiao Mountain. There were many shops and it was noisy. Everything was sold in the market, not to mention restaurants and brothels. As for all kinds of miraculous elixirs, robes, weapons, and rare antiques, there are countless of them. There are even wedding shops that sell coffins. There are people who come here to inquire about information and seek money for their respective forces behind the scenes, as well as those who simply go out to relax and enjoy the mountains and rivers, and those who want to fish in troubled waters and make a profit if they have dates or not. The Jinpu dynasty, which had just restored the country a few years ago, temporarily opened up a relatively stable underground passage, which was just enough to allow 2 ferries to go back and forth at the same time. The winding journey was more than 100 miles long, and it took a lot of manpower and material resources. The National Treasury savings were half empty, but the Ministry of Revenue was surprised to find that with a ferry, they could quickly recover their money. Nowadays, inside and outside, the 3 religions and 9 streams are mixed together, and many conflicts have occurred overtly and covertly. Among them, 7 or 8 conflicts have resulted in human lives, not to mention those who were secretly destroyed and disappeared. It was Jinpu who had just returned to the country. The dynasty couldn't control it at all. During this period, it initially wanted to establish its authority and kill the chickens to scare the monkeys, so it took the lives of several members of the royal family. They didn't know how they died, and their bodies were not found. As for the fights among the Qi practitioners, the emperor's choice of fighting, the emperor's choking, the amaranth, the clumsy bald fold, the escort, the rush, the cricket, the mace, the tactic, the snipe, the tomb, the snipe, the tomb, the snipe, the tomb, chewing bushes. Just talking about the local monks in Fuyao continent, there are as many as 7 or 8 allied forces, large and small, stationed in the cave in areas as big as towns. As for these temporary gangs on the surface, whether there is support from the other continent sects behind them, God knows. We only talk about the rich and powerful Lu family of Aizhou, but there is almost no mention of the Qinggong mountain of Luxiazu and the Tianyu cave. How can we not get involved? Are you really just watching from afar? The problem is that the Chinese Confucian temple has a delicate attitude towards this matter. Although the Confucian temple has always adhered to the purpose of not competing with the monks for profit, if the Confucian temple really wanted to appoint a college chief, he would just say that all this vein belongs to the Confucian temple. But it saves trouble, everyone has given up on that idea. If you say that the Confucian temple acted like this, it would definitely attract complaints, but at most it would be something that you dare not dare to say. If you want to fight against the barbaric world, the Confucian temple must be short of money. It is reasonable to take it from the world and use it for the world. Moreover, the Confucian temple now acts vigorously and resolutely, which is very different from before. It has set rules. Anyone who dares to violate the ban must go to the local academy in Izhou to read the books of sages. In the words of Wen Yu, who is now the deputy director of Tongyi's Haotianmu Academy, he said, "It's not too late to catch up on the truth and study. If the Qi practitioners have committed more serious crimes, they can go directly to Gong Dalin. Maybe they are lucky and can see the wild Lu Chao." Since the Chinese Confucian temple did not express its position, the Jin Pu dynasty could not control the situation, and the top sects in other continents who were in the Ascension realm sitting on the top of the mountain were all hiding behind each other, and no one dared to be the leader. This makes this place look more and more treacherous, with undercurrents surging. Xie Songhua was neatly dressed and carried a bamboo box on her back. Her two disciples, Juxing and Chaomu, were two children in the past and are now teenagers. One carries a bamboo box on his back and the other holds a hiking pole. Although her hometown is Aizu, she has a very bad impression of Aizu, and her impression of Lu Kaixin, who is the best in the world in making money, was even more average in her early years. Wandering, living in clouds and water, after forming a pill, he traveled more in Jinjiazu and Luxiazu. In the early years, she had fought against Situ Jiyu. There was a small misunderstanding, but at that time, the two wild cultivators had concealed their identities and suppressed their realm, so neither of them made a killing blow to the other. Later, when we went to the Great Wall of Jinchi, we happened to chat about old things while drinking at the same table, and after checking accounts, we realized that it was the other person. And now there is a rumor that Xie Songhua is very likely to reach the immortal realm in just a few decades. Therefore, she unexpectedly agreed to become a worshipper of the Lu family in Aizhou, which caused quite a stir. Because an old man of high seniority in the Aizhou Lu family ancestral hall had invited Xie Songhua to be a guest many times, even if it was just a guest by name. As a result, the impatient Xie Songhua replied directly, saying, "Thank you very much, Songhua, I'm tired of living, old man, you are asking for a sword." But in the end, Xie Songhua actually served as a registered worshipper, and she was not even a guest. Now Xie Songhua's two direct disciples, Juxing and Chaomu, before they reached the upper 5 realms, all expenses, from the natural materials and earthly treasures required for sword refining, additional natal items, to food, clothing, housing and transportation, Aizhou Lu family all rounded. When the outside world heard about this, they couldn't help but sigh with sincerity. A little money in the mountains is nothing, but if you have money like the Aizhou Lu family, anything really matters. In a huge underground cave temporarily named Feng Shui Cave, there is a private house located at the highest point, which is carved out of the wall, with pavilions and attics suspended in the air. And along the underground river, mansions stretched on both sides, lights were like daylight, orioles were singing and swallows were dancing, and there was a buzz of people all day long, like a flaming dragon. In this high-hanging mansion, in a plainly decorated waiting room, 3 young sword cultivators had been waiting here for a long time, chatting while waiting for someone. They are 3 young Jindan sword cultivators, almost all in their early 30s, not even in their 30s. The 3 people are Song Gaoyuan, Scrofulariaceae, and Chao Gun. They are all top-notch Taoist geniuses, and deserve to be the heroes of the mountain. His realm, appearance, demeanor, intelligence, and life experience are all top-notch. Especially Chao Gun, whose appearance is particularly outstanding. He wears a purple gold crown, a green robe, and a white jade flute at his waist. He is a handsome young man. They did not rush to the door of the house early to greet him. At this moment, they just stood up and clasped their fists, without any red tape. Even though I met all the senior sword cultivators at this moment, there were no polite words from those who had met such and such a sword immortal. This scene really made the old people who had never been to the Great Wall of Sword Chi feel very sad and sigh in their hearts. They were worthy of the young people who had been to the Great Wall of Sword Chi. But even swordsmen like Pu He and Situ Jiu, who were known to have bad tempers, didn't think there was anything wrong. Previously at the Jinqi Ferry Inn, this group of swordsmen who were familiar with each other were cursing and trying to undermine each other. Now, they all behaved as if they were participating in the discussion of the patriarch hall. Especially Pu Lauer, who is recognized in the mountains as any kid who doesn't follow the rules and lacks etiquette on my side. I will teach you how to be a good person for your parents and masters. At this moment, he was not careless, but looked solemn. Just before he crossed the threshold, he saw a few junior sword cultivators in the room who were at the Golden Core realm. The old man took the initiative to clasp his fists. Song Gaoyuan was born in Fuyazhou Lujiao Palace. As long as he reaches the upper 5 realms in the future, he will be the unsuspecting candidate for the palace master. Firstly, Song Gaoyuan was born as an immortal in the mountains. His parents were Taoist couples, and they were both direct descendants of the current master of the Lujiao Palace. Furthermore, the highly respected patriarch Rongguan had always regarded Song Gaoyuan most highly. Scrofulariaceae comes from the Jinjiazu ethereal sect, and the master's ancestral mountain is Epiphyllum Peak. Every time after the rain, it has the reputation of the dragon emerges from the cave, the clouds are yellow, the sky is purple, the master Yuan Qingyao, in the immortal realm, has an immortal weapon rank. The blue-purple book is called Collection of Heroes of Hiyue. The ancestor died in battle. He was the first local immortal in Fuyao continent to die in battle. Yingyue Creek is at the foot of Baiyue Mountain and Sweeping Flower Pavilion is on Lianri Peak. The 2 mountains are adjacent to each other. They were once the sacred places in the hearts of monks who were born as monsters in a continent. It is also the one in the Howran world that has the most guests and demon monks in the sect's ancestral hall, except for the Iron Tree Mountain in the Middle Earth. In that tragic war that swept across the continent, these genealogy monks who were from the local demon clan in Fuyao continent followed Yuan Qingyao to the battlefield, and most of them died in the battle. These 2 top sects were both destroyed in the war and are now being rebuilt. Chao Gun was born in the Fangzuan sect of Liuxia continent and was famous for his expertise in refining Fangzuan items. However, the requirements for accepting disciples were high and the number of monks with genealogies was very small. There is a dry stone standing on the top of the mountain, higher than the other peaks. On the dry stone cliff, there are 2 big characters in the seal carved by Bai Yi, which are said to be written by Bai Yi himself, mending the sky. The founding master opened a study here, Changxing Zhai, which became the private monastery of successive sect masters and was passed down from generation to generation. The previous sect leader was the second person on the mountain in Liuxia continent after Jing Hao, the Tai Bao of the Qin Palace, and even ahead of the Tianyu cave master. The reason why he took office was that this old sect master was one of the very few great monks who took the initiative to rush to the battlefield of Jinjiasu. Not long after returning to the sect, he announced that he was in seclusion, but in fact he was separated from the world. Now that the Fang Cun sect is preparing to establish the next sect in Fuyao continent, it is said that Chao Gun, who is only in the Jindan realm, hopes to obtain permission from the Chinese Confucian Temple to serve as the leader of the next sect by virtue of his military exploits accumulated in a foreign land. But these are not reasons. There is only one real reason. These three young people who returned to their hometown in the world were from the lineage of hidden officials who stayed at the Summer Palace on the Great Wall of Sword Qi. And as a sword cultivator of Yingguan lineage, he went to the battlefield. Among this group of sword cultivators, excluding those young and young girls who are disciples, there are actually differences between them. For example, CS Songhua, who is recognized as having the greatest military exploits among them, and who once personally killed a Yupu realm sword cultivator monster, may not necessarily value the accumulation of military exploits. Song Pin is not as good as himself. Song Pin must look down on Pu He. Pu He who fell in the Great Wall of Sword Qi looks down on Situ Jiyu who has never fallen into trouble and only fishes everywhere. Situ Jiyu looks down on Situ Jiyu who was just a young man. Yu Yu has been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi but has done nothing. Yu Yu looks down on those old sword cultivators who have never been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Among them, those who have never been to Daoxian Mountain look down on them. I have been to Daoxian Mountain but never to the Sword Qi Great Wall which is so close at hand. Reason. The truth lies in the battlefield of the Sword Qi Great Wall. There are 2 rows of seats in the hall. The sword cultivator who was born in Jinchi Great Wall sat on one side, and those who had never been there sat in the other row. Perhaps to take care of the latter's mood, or to avoid the disparity in the number of people between the 2 sides, or to facilitate face-to-face discussions, Chao Gun and the others sat opposite CS Songhua and the others, in front of the 7 earthly immortal sword cultivators. We had already prepared some drinks and food, which were placed on the flower table between the 2 seats. There were cakes and lotus root noodles, iced plum wine, mung bean soup. The girls Sun Zhao, Jin Wan and Shui Zhou have already begun to aim at the food at hand, and they only need to wait for the masters to nod before they can start. As for the content of tonight's discussion, they are very self-aware and have no business speaking themselves, so just listen. His temperament is as arrogant as he does, and he also has the same thoughts. It is obvious that the children who left the Great Wall of Sword Qi back then were very familiar with the Summer Palace in terms of their sword training aptitude, the quality of their natal flying swords, and even their taste. CS Songhua was amazed that Yingguan was better at taking care of children. I'm just a little thin-skinned and can't afford to joke. There are 2 local sword cultivators in Fuyao continent, one is a Yuanying realm cultivator, one is a genealogy cultivator, and the other is a mountain and wild cultivator. In addition, there are 2 old nascent soul realm sword cultivators from Liuxia continent and Zijinjia continent in the northwest, one male and one female. They have been in seclusion for the past few years. One is trying to break through the realm, and the other has been recuperating for many years. They were temporarily called to Fuyao continent. Making up the numbers. Song Pin and Pu He just sent a letter each. The 2 swordsmen didn't say why or what they planned to do in the letter, they only gave an address where they could meet. He didn't reply to a letter asking why, and hurried to the location given in the letter without saying a word. Golden elixir. Not enough to watch at all. I am not qualified to let those sword immortals privately invite me to participate in this matter. It's just that there are 3 more young Jindan realm sword cultivators who are calling people. The 3 of them are direct descendants of the ancestor halls on their respective mountains, and without exception, there are ancestors of their own lineage in the mountains. They are sword immortals, and they have all been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Therefore, there are 7 sword cultivators in total who have never been to the Great Wall of Sword Chi, 4 at the nascent Soul Realm and 3 at the Golden Core Realm. Xie Songhui's disciples held their postures in the morning and evening. Song Pin's disciples, Sun Zhao and Jin Luan. He took Yidu and Shueshu away from the Great Wall of Sword Chi. And Yu, the most shameless old guy, actually kidnapped 2 direct disciples from Luopa Mountain, Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting. After sitting down, still carrying the bamboo box on his back, he sat upright and placed the green bamboo stick across his knees in the morning and evening. Yedu sat cross-legged, crossed his arms across his chest, and began to close his eyes and meditate. Xie Songhua took 2 of his direct descendants to practice swordsmanship in the Ice Field and Leigong Temple in the north of Aizu for several years, with great success. The young man only had 1 natal flying sword, Lei Qi, which was rated as Bai Zhong by the Summer Palace at that time, which was very high. However, the girl Chao Mu owns 2 flying swords, Pang Tuo and Hong Enai, whose ranks are lower E and higher B respectively. There are 3 grades of A, B and C, each with upper, middle and lower grades, for a total of 9 ranks. In fact, being able to be rated, even if it is ranked B or C, is a calculated natal flying sword. This selection, which comes from the Summer Palace, is more about considering and taking care of battlefield fighting, and is not suitable for sword masters to compete against each other. At that time, there were a total of 16 sword cultivators from the Yingguan lineage in the Great Wall of Sword Chi, the old Summer Palace, and 6 sword cultivators from other places. In addition to Chen Pingan, who served as the last hidden official, there were also Lin Junbai, Deng Liang, Chao Gun, Scrofulariaceae, and Song Gaoyuan. At that time, Lin Junbai was the first among the foreign sword cultivators to leave the Summer Palace and return to his hometown of the Shaoyuan dynasty in the divine continent of Middle-earth. Not long after, Lin Junbai served as the national master and became the youngest national master among the 10 great dynasties of Hauran. Deng Liang from Juda Mountain in Aizu arrived in Feishing City in the 7th year of Jiachuan in the colorful world. He was still in the nascent Soul Realm when he left Xianxian Mountain, and finally reached the upper 5 realms in a foreign land. Chao Gun, Scrofulariaceae, and Song Gaoyuan each returned to their hometowns and sections. The 3 young swordsmen each had new opportunities. The 3 of them were relatively close neighbors, all in the 3 continents to the west of Hauran, but it was obvious that Chao Gun and Scrofulariaceae had a closer relationship. Although the new Yingguan lineage of sword cultivators in Feishing City has retained a considerable number of old people compared to the previous generation, it seems that overall they are still inferior. After all, Mi the Sword Immortal, who is the leader, is no longer in the new Summer Palace. Chao Gun once said something from the bottom of his heart: "As long as I walk out of the Summer Palace alive one day, I will never want to read another book in my life." And after they left the Sword Chi Great Wall, from their own silence to the silence of their respective sects, they seemed to be downplaying their trip to the Sword Chi Great Wall intentionally or unintentionally. In the Summer Palace, there was almost internal strife, and they were almost going to ask each other for swordsmanship. Once they really started to fight, it is estimated that the local swordsmanship and the foreign swordsmanship would be completely divided. For example, Su Ning once scolded all 18 generations of Scrofulariaceae's ancestors. In a scolding war, almost everyone participates, everyone scolds, and everyone is scolded. Except for the 3 who didn't speak, the young Yingguan sat firmly on the Diayutai. Chou Miao Jianxian was also calm, and there was Guozhujiu who silently recorded every swear word, and he learned it. In fact, Lin Junbai was the most pitiful. He wanted to be the troublemaking peacemaker, but Dongbu finally took the opportunity and scolded Lin Junbai bloody. In the end, it was Chen Pingan and Chou Miao who joined forces to prevent the intensifying situation from getting worse. In the past, He lived in a palace as a summer resort and was a hidden official. All sword cultivators have been to the battlefield, many times. Everyone was wounded, but only one died. The sword cultivates the sorrowful seedlings. This local sword cultivator has a high realm, good qualifications, has an overall view, has a stable temperament, is thoughtful, and almost never gets angry. Chou Miao has too many advantages. Even Lin Junbai, who is arrogant, is willing to admit that Chou Miao Jianxian is the best candidate to succeed Yin Guan, and he is indeed inferior to Chou Miao. The first words Chao Gun said today were scary. We must assume that there is a great Ascension Realm monster hidden here. Scrofulariaceae added, it has the strength of the great demon of the wild old throne. The three Chao Guns now look like handsome young men, but Chao Gun is a little special. His words have a strong local accent, soft, and he often speaks in dialects, chewing them up. Hey, that's so cool. This was always a topic in the summer palace back then. Dongbu and Guozhuzhou especially liked to imitate Chao Gun in speaking. Chao Gun had fair skin and a tender face, and he was often teased by them until his face turned red. It's no wonder that when Lord Yin Guan suggested that when they went out to fight in the city, to be careful, it was best for women to disguise themselves as men. As for men, the same applies. At that time, Lord Yin Guan's eyes were mainly on Lin Junbai and Chao Gun. Hearing that they might need to face a big demon with the same killing power as the old throne, Song hired a few people. Of course it was nothing. The faces of the young Jindan sword cultivators behind Chao Gun inevitably changed slightly, but they soon returned to normal, with firm eyes. One of the women even had a fiery look in her eyes. She looked like she was a master who was not afraid of trouble and preferred to cause trouble. It is estimated that the master of her sect was worried. Song Gaoyuan said, there is a high probability that this will not be the case. If there is a great Ascension Realm demon, the Confucian Temple will definitely not sit idly by. The greater possibility is that there is an Immortal Realm demon clan who is good at disguise and concealing qi, and is proficient in formations. He will always be patient. If you don't send it, you want to make waves here and take the opportunity to plan something big. I'll give you a random example. At least some aspects of setting up and launching the formation require certain unknown prerequisites. Chao Gun said with a smile, for example, if this vein is a fishing rod, then we are the bait and hook, and that big fish, whose hiding place is unknown for the time being, may not bite the hook and just eat the bait. So, I hope everyone here is prepared for the worst. Scrofulariaceae stood up, took out 3 scrolls from his sleeves, and threw them high. 3 situation maps were hung side by side in the lobby. Each map was densely packed with marks and text annotations. Before you guys arrived, the 3 of us had a rough look inside and outside Chuanzhou Mountain. We had roughly checked the dragon veins outside, the internal structure, and the distribution of all the forces. But it was in a hurry, so it was really rough. Regarding the hidden backing of those superficial forces, the extended context diagram, their intersection, and whether there is any possibility of connection with each other, the situation diagram has clear records for reference only. At the same time, we hope that you will not be misled by us, but all the above you need to pay extra attention to the content written in red text, it must be correct. The best result is that there is no plan by the wild demon tribe here. Our trip to Chuanzhou Mountain is really just a trip. But it is unlikely. In a compromise, this monster does exist, but it doesn't have the courage and strength to fight to the death. It can only hide in the dark and disrupt the situation. Then what we have to do is even simpler, cast the net. Next, no one should be idle, go out more, try to hide your identity, and don't worry about whether it will alert the snake. The more carefully arranged the formation, the more likely it will be. It's about being interconnected. We are like fish hitting a net. If we pull too much, we may find clues. If we assume that people from the Confucian temple also send people to keep an eye on this place, the number of people will definitely not be too many, not to mention that it may not be useful if there are too many. No matter how cheap they are in doing things, they are still not unruly and unruly enough. So we need to help check for leaks and fill in the gaps. If we were the planners of Jiazi account, we would definitely let one or several cheap practitioners who are smart enough. If they stay here, generally speaking, they will be given amulets. If they are left here by the barbaric world, they will definitely pay special attention to the sages and gentlemen of the Confucian temple. If they have the slightest suspicion, they will deliberately and carefully avoid them. The three of us all used a secret amulet made by Yuhua Mountain. Our real bodies are not actually here. We have all changed our identities and are hidden somewhere outside. Our realm is not high, so we can only rely on hard work to make up for our shortcomings. Speaking of this, Chao Gun looked at Situ Jiyu. He had been to the 5 foreign realms of the Sword Chi Great Wall. Their natal flying swords and their respective magical powers would be secretly recorded in the Summer Palace. Situ Jiyu laughed from the bottom of his heart and said, Song Pin, Pu He, I, each have secretly sacrificed a flying sword of their own, and cooperated with each other. Until this moment, we can definitely use our spiritual consciousness to explore this place, or use palm observation. There are a total of 6 chi practitioners with mountain and river skills. 4 of them can be picked out immediately. The other 2 are hidden deeper, but the range is small and easy to find. Assuming they are wild beasts, you have to try to know whether it can be killed by us instantly. As he spoke, Situ Jiyu reached out and pointed at one of the situation diagrams, and circled 6 places. Xie Songhua chuckled. As long as she finds her accurate whereabouts, killing an immortal is not easy, but it is not that difficult. To say the least, as long as she was injured by her full blow and passed the sword, it would not be an easy task to escape from Song Pin's men. Chao Gun said calmly, there are at least 7 places. Song Gaoyuan rubbed his eyebrows. It seems that the effect of the 3 sword immortals' flying sword combination is still lower than expected. Situ Jiyu's natal flying sword is called Water Vein. When it transforms into a void, it can follow the spiritual energy between heaven and earth and circulate quietly. The thicker the spiritual energy, the more condensed the flying sword is. In the history of Liuxia continent, a certain jade master died suddenly and for no reason while refining qi. The sect has not found out who killed its ancestor, so it can only use qi refining as the reason. The case was finalized by accidentally crossing the robbery corpse and solving the problem. And one of Song Pin's 2 natal flying swords, the Door God, can be attached to Situ Jiyu's water vein, just like a water patrolling around, inspecting the territory, and at the same time dispatching various priests to guard various places. In addition, one of Pu He's natal flying swords, couplet, means sword refining, also known as Mo Yuanyang. One of the magical powers of Pu He's natal flying swords is to assist the compatibility of the first 2 flying swords. It's a pity that Pu He only has 2 flying swords, and this flying sword, Mo Yuanyang, is a bit useless. If he could have 3 flying swords, Pu He felt that he would have become an immortal already. When he arrived at the Great Wall of Sword Chi, let alone the bottom of the upper 5 realms, Milanyao, even when he faced the sword immortals Mihu and Yuqing, he was have the strength to fight. Surely we can win. Fuck your motherfuckers guaranteed victory. Situ Jiyu understood instantly and choked on his words. The 7 Earth Immortal sword cultivators who had never been to the Great Wall of Sword Chi finally came to their senses. It was obvious that one of Chao Gun's true forms was using some secret technique to explore this place at this moment. Scrofulariace smiled and said, take your time. It may not be that it cannot be found out. It is possible that the other party was cautious enough and did not take action at all. Song Pin said, use the stupidest elimination method, don't keep these 6. Her face is very cool, her makeup is very attractive, and she has more hair accessories. She and Xie Songhua, who is accustomed to wearing a bare face, are 2 extremes. As a secular woman, your beauty will captivate the whole country. If you wear gold and silver, which is cumbersome, it will only be more than enough. However, it was piled up by Song Pin, and she looks good. Pu He chuckled and said, okay, this is a good idea. I'll do it. I have a good reputation, and I don't miss a few innocuous grievances on the mountain. One of the direct disciples of the old sword cultivator, Young Yi Du, said from his heart, Old Pu, I heard that the Confucian temple is now strictly controlled. If you kill all of them here, the genealogy will not be preserved. Let's go down the mountain this time, even if we can't go back. Are you ready? Have you thought of a place to stay? Don't be too careless when doing things. I have an idea. If you don't leave me here, you will have a place to stay. For us master and disciple, we might as well go to Luopa Mountain to seek refuge with Mr. Ingguan. The girl Seshu nodded and agreed, okay, but it's best for you, master, to do things for each one. Nodu and I will keep the sect's genealogy and prepare it with both hands, lest the sect doesn't keep it and Lord Ingguan doesn't accept it, but I really have to beg on the roadside. Scrofulariaceae had no choice but to explain, Pu He, when Song Pin said don't keep it, he didn't mean to send them on their way. Song Gaoyuan said, don't rush to throw them out now, we will observe them secretly for a few days. Scrofulariaceae nodded, they are already in the star position. Scrofulariaceae's natal flying sword is called 3 Tans. According to the ranking of summer palaces, it is a well-deserved top 1. His flying sword is both offensive and defensive, and it also has huge growth potential. This is the key to what swordsmen dream of most. According to the Daomen Zhaijiao ritual, there are 9 ways to build an altar, divided into 3 types, upper, middle and lower. Before Scrofulariaceae went to the Sword Chi Great Wall, she had already created the 3 lower altars, step by step. From low to high, they were the Disaster Altar with 81 stars and the Blessing Altar with 120 stars, and the Longevity Altar with star position 240. After returning to his hometown and obtaining the relics of his ancestor, Hiyuing Ling Ji, Scrofulariaceae retreated and came out again, the natal flying sword became even more magnificent, and the 3 altars were reborn, from high to low, Huang Lu Yenshou Altar, Jinqing Altar and Chu, Evil Altar. Therefore, in the Summer Palace, Scrofulariaceae won a good reputation from many colleagues. A natural formation master, a 2-legged walking dojo, the more natal objects he can refine, the better, a sword cultivator of the same realm who is invincible, and the resources for ascension. Even Wang Xinshue said something fair, Scrofulariaceae, Mr. Ingguan is protecting you now. In the future, when Mr. Ingguan goes to your hometown and is an unfamiliar place, you have to protect Mr. Ingguan. The young official immediately nodded in approval, this must be the truth. I was so ashamed of Scrofulariaceae. Pu He, an old swordsman who is very wild when he opens his mouth, is tall and thin, with a gloomy face, which always gives people a sinister feeling that is difficult to deal with. No need to doubt, this is called phase coming from the heart, you read that right. Pu He is famous in his hometown for being withdrawn and insidious, but he is a veritable genealogy master, a very senior sect ancestor, there is nothing he can do. When Pu He was young, he was very talented and a sword cultivator. He was accepted as a close disciple by the senior old man in the Fendu sect at that time. The old monk soon passed away. When the funeral arrangements were made, he also let the man be the leader. The junior sister duo takes care of Pu He. In his hometown sect, Puhi almost never paid attention to business. Instead, he would only cause trouble for the sect. He would chase after him here and there and help clean up the mess. Almost all the incense and love on the mountain that the ancestors had worked hard to save were wiped out by Puhi. He had squandered everything on his own, and when the head female cultivator passed away, no one would be able to control Puhi. And the junior fellow who later became the head lawyer was used to being bullied by Puhi since he was a child. It is no exaggeration to say that he trembled when he saw Puhi. In fact, the senior fellow of the contemporary sect was in a similar situation when he was young. People often frame and blame this old swordsman who likes to frame others. Then Puhi took over almost everyone and openly said, "Yes, I did it." The Patriarch Hall couldn't stop him, so he could only help wipe his again and again, and through his sect's Shanshue D newspaper, he spoke sincerely and vowed to the outside world, "I swear to God that this was definitely not Puhi's doing. One continent accounts for half of the bad things. Otherwise, why would Jiang Shangjin be called the second Puha, when he earned such a great reputation in Luzhou, Beiju? Therefore, the salary of the chi practitioner who is in charge of Shanshue Dibao, a sect of the Fendu sect, is much higher than that of his colleagues with general sect prefixes." At the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Xie Zhi, who was a casual cultivator from Shanzi, Fuyao continent, stood with Puhi, a cultivator from Liuxia continent, and their identities had to be exchanged. Puhi had a disastrous defeat with Mi Yuwenjian and lived in the Jiangxian's private residence, Cuiyu Pavilion, outside the city. Xie Zhi's private residence was nearby, named Mei, which looked slightly rosy. Xie Zhi was born as a wild cultivator, and his sword training aptitude was not very good. It was recognized that he relied on great perseverance to stumble into the upper 5 realms. The old swordsman has been a bachelor all his life, and he didn't even have a disciple in Fuyao continent. When Xie Zhi finally changed his mind and wanted to collect 1 or 2 direct descendants on the Sword Qi Great Wall, it was too late. The old man failed to accept a disciple and failed to return to his hometown. Rushing to the battlefield for the last time, Xie Zhi fought side by side with Yuanying realm swordsman Lu Su, who was also a foreigner. He handed over the sword for the last time in his life, just to clear the way for the younger generation to escape from trouble and return home alive. In the Summer Palace, there were also foreign sword cultivators, and they were also young. In fact, Song Gaoyuan and Deng Liang were closer to Chou Miao and the local sword cultivators. Instead, they were with Qin Pingan, the hermit official, and the people surrounding the young hermit officer. That mountaintop cannot be said to be out of place, after all, it is not that harmonious. As for that small mountaintop, if the owner of the mountain is Lord Yinguan, then the deputy mountain owner is Guizhuzhou, who was the lowest in the world at that time. He has 4 major subordinates. Dogleg Escort, Scrofulary Ace Chao Gun, Wang Xinshui Gu Jianlong. However, Song Gaoyuan and others, especially Lin Junbai, all knew very well that Luo Zhini was interested in Lord Yinguan, but they chose to see through it without telling her. I remember that on the day of leaving the Summer Palace, it was Chou Miao who saw off Song Gaoyuan on behalf of Yinguan, who couldn't get away, and gave him a package, saying it was a parting gift from Yinguan. After arriving at the ferry, Song Gaoyuan opened it and found out that it contained the relics of fellow swordsman Xie Xian and a file record about Xie Zhi's situation in his hometown. Before the discussion ended, the 7 Earth Immortal sword cultivators all received an errand to display their magical powers, each with their own methods. A sword cultivator presented a flying sword like an ancient mirror, stepped into the mirror, and then walked out of the ancient mirror from the back. There was another strange figure whose soul seemed to have changed. Another sword cultivator's robe rippled, and in an instant he turned into a walking corpse that was weak in body but not weak in spirit. Then it turned into a puff of black smoke and dissipated. A sword cultivator took out a standing phoenix hairpin and shook it gently. The golden light rippled like water patterns, and it disappeared in an instant. A sword cultivator sacrificed the natal object, which was an ancient object. It was a white jade rope pattern with a concentric knot. It could be used by other monks to borrow Taoism from each other for a period of time. There was also a sword cultivator who took out the ancient remains of a woman in a colorful dress from his sleeve. He shrunk down, as small as a dust particle, and went to take up residence in the cave between her eyebrows. The woman in a colorful dress with heavy makeup stepped out in one step and shrunk to the ground. When Shanha appeared again, he was already in a secluded place in a high-rise building. A sword cultivator used his natal flying sword, Yunwei Bell, and a crisp sound echoed in a certain shady alley, and the real body appeared there without anyone noticing, while the subtle sounds in the lobby still lingered. There are signs of lingering around for 3 days. 2 female sword fairies stood on the railing and looked into the distance. Compared with the evil aura that filled his body when he just left Xianxian Mountain, Song Pin's current aura has softened much. Even when she returned to her master's school later, Song Pin still carried a strong murderous aura, and she did not recover for a long time. CS Songhua smiled and asked, "Let's see who reaches the immortal realm earlier." Song Pin smiled and said, "Even if you win by luck, it will be a weak victory." CS Songhua clicked her tongue. If a woman is beautiful, she can be beautiful. Since you can't be envious, you might as well stop being envious. It's not without reason that you don't have a Taoist companion. The famous sword, Fuyao, that Song Pin carried on his back concealed a considerable part of Fuyazou's swordsmanship. It's a pity that Song Pin didn't want to take advantage of this huge advantage in her early years in Jinjiasu. She once made a rule for herself that she would never touch the luck of the Fuyao sword. When he arrived at the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he only participated in one city defense battle. Song Pin immediately regretted it. Since he was a sword cultivator, he couldn't be too girly. At the top of the city, Song Pin only regretted that his level was too low and his sword was too slow. So after returning to his hometown, Song Pin kept his 2 direct disciples in the sect in recent years and asked the sect leader to teach them swordsmanship and Taoism. She came to Fuyao continent quietly, relying on the right time, place, and people, and tried to refine her unparalleled sword luck as soon as possible. Refining Qi luck itself is like asking a swordsman for a sword, it is not easy. Song Pin and CS Songhua and Li Kai, who are both female swordsmen, are indeed different from each other in terms of their sword styles. When he returned to the Jinjiasu sect that year, Song Pin held a disciple acceptance ceremony that did not invite any outsiders to watch. Even within the sect, only a few fellow monks from the Patriarch Hall attended the ceremony. 2 peaks full of spiritual energy were also reserved for Sun Zhao and Jin Wan. As soon as the 2 direct descendants reached the golden elixir, the peak opening ceremony was held. The sect's ancestral hall agreed without hesitation. However, after a great war, the sect's ancestral hall shrine, as well as the portraits of all previous ancestors, had to be moved to Liuxia continent. By the time the war ended, the sect's old site had long been reduced to ruins for the 2 disciples. The carefully selected hilltop was no longer suitable for practice, and Song Pin felt very guilty about this. CS Songhua joked, "You are different from me. You have been annoyed by people over the years, right?" Song Pin shook his head and said, "It's okay. Anyway, I'm hiding away from people, so I'm pretty clean." After these sword immortals returned to their hometown, they never took the initiative to mention the Great Wall of Sword Qi. However, there were always some friends from their hometown who often asked about it, and these were questions they did not want to answer. For example, what is the swordsmanship of the boss swordsman who only uses a few swords from beginning to end? As the legitimate son of Yixing, Al Yang, and the direct descendant of Wen Xing, if the 2 of them fight freely, who will be more powerful? Among the 3 old swordsmen who carved letters, Qi Tingji is the only one left in our world. Is his swordsmanship higher or lower than Dong Sanging and Qin Shi? Why did Xiao Sun, the newly appointed hidden official, betray the Great Wall of Sword Qi with 2 sword immortals of the same lineage? Has she really become a 14th realm sword cultivator who has taken refuge in the wilderness? Who is that young man named Qin Pingan? Why did he take over the Summer Palace and serve as the last hermit official? How could he become Ning Yao's Taoist companion? CS Songhua smiled and asked, "You really don't want to find a Taoist companion?" Song Pin said, "The other party must be a sword cultivator with a higher level than me." CS Songhua shook his head, "It's difficult, it's too difficult. When you refine the Fuyasu swordsmanship and reach the immortal realm, is it higher than you? Must it be an Ascension realm sword cultivator? There are only a few in the whole world now, one you can count them all on your hands, and all of them are rotten old men who are half buried in the ground. Who can you look for? If you look for them, a pear blossom will overwhelm a begonia." Song Pin smiled and said, "Then don't look for it." CS Songhua chuckled and said, "You can wait and see. It will take 100 or hundreds of years. Old cows eating young grass will have a different taste." Song Pin raised his eyebrows and said, "Well, see." CS Songhua lowered her voice and said, "I do have a ready-made perfect candidate. Can you refer to it?" Next, the 2 female sword fairies spoke from their hearts. It was definitely more exciting for them to talk like this than to drink. Not far away, the adjacent houses and observation decks are just like the scene of the ferry leaving Xianxian Mountain. Scrofulariaceae lay on the railing, looked away, turned to greet the 2 girls who came out of the house. Sun Zhao and Jin Wan, the little girls who took the ferry thousands of miles away from their hometown on the Elk Cliff of the Hanging Mountain, are now also slim girls. It's just that the 2 children at that time still naively thought that they were only leaving their hometown for a short time, and that when the war stopped, they could return to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. It might be a few years, 10 years, or at most a longer time, but I didn't expect that in the end, only the city head that was beaten into 2 parts of the entire hometown was left. There is only one swordsman who has been guarding there for many years. Until Howren Tianxia won that battle. But my hometown became my hometown. I remember that I took a ferry trip with Master. Master did not buy a jade boarding pass for them. To put it simply, they had to take the boat without paying. Their master, who always had crooked eyebrows, was as gentle as water, and always spoke in a soft voice, was really good-tempered. But at that time on the ferry, Song Pin said a very domineering but matter-of-fact statement, "You'll take it if I want to save your face." Finally, the ferry steward hurried over, personally clearing the way for the group and arranging the best accommodation for them. I bowed my head and bowed down all the way, apologizing, for fear of not being well received. It was at that moment that the 2 little girls began to understand a little bit about the tone, weight and style of a Jade Pure Realm swordsman who was so powerful in the world. Jin Wan smiled and called, "Brother Scrofulariaceae." We left Hangzhou together and took the same cross-continental ferry. We lived next door and often chatted together. Scrofulariaceae smiled and nodded, "Hey, you have grown into a big girl. Do you have a man you like? If so, then I have to help check it. The genealogy monks in the world are full of thieves and are all sanctimonious. Instead of waiting until you are heartbroken and then I hack them half to death, it is better to keep an eye on them now. Of course, if they are a perfect match made in heaven, that would be the best." It seems like a joke, but Scrofulariaceae is actually not all a joke. After all, they are the direct descendants of the swordsman Song Pin, and they are not direct disciples in the general sense. This means that the men who become Taoist companions with them receive the protection of Song Pin and Song Pin's sect almost at the same time. Although Scrofulariaceae is young, she is no stranger to the calculation methods of Howren's sect Immortal Mansion and genealogical monk. Sun Zao said shyly, "No. We are still young and it is still early. We have made an appointment with Jean Wan. We will think about all these things after forming the elixir." Scrofulariaceae is proficient in playing chess, and their master happens to also like to play chess. On the ferry, everyone has their own victory and defeat. Judging from the posture, it is certainly not the so-called human chess. At that time, Song Pin asked who was the best chess player in the Summer Palace, you Scrofulariaceae or Lin Junbai from the Shaoyuan dynasty in China. Scrofulariaceae said, "Lin Junbai and I are equally good at chess. The most powerful one is of course our Lord Yin Guan. He has never lost." Song Pin was a little surprised and said that he would have a chance to discuss with Yin Guan in the future. She wasn't too surprised. Chen Pingan was Cui Han's younger brother after all. Scrofulariaceae was not happy and said with a smile that we Yin Guan generally do not talk easily with people. If Song Jianxian wants to play chess with Yin Guan, he must get through me first. As a result, after that, Scrofulariaceae no longer hid her true chess skills. Song Pin lost 7 or 8 games in a row in one day, and she was no longer willing to play chess with Scrofulariaceae. It was obvious that none of the young sword cultivators who came out of the Summer Palace were honest and responsible. Scrofulariaceae joked, "Sun Zao, do you still cry and say you miss home now?" Sun Zao glared at him, wondering which pot he didn't want to open. Scrofulariaceae hesitated for a moment, then said, "This side of Howren Tianxia is no better than the Great Wall of Sword Qi. People's hearts are more complex. It's easy to get confused about good and bad, right and wrong. So you too must trust your own intuition and judge people. The first feeling is often very important. When you encounter something that feels wrong and you can't explain the reason, you can ask the master immediately. Don't delay, and don't be afraid of delaying your master's sword practice. After all, people are different from each other. Belly, remember to watch more, listen more, do less, and talk less. When you are concentrating on practicing swordsmanship, both parties should get together more often to review and try to understand why others do, say, and think this way. Over time, you will become better and better. The more accurately you understand what the real Howren world is." The two girls looked at each other and smiled. Scrofulariaceae smiled knowingly and said, "It seems your master said so too. This is reassuring. Otherwise, if they did something in Jinjiazu that could have been avoided with a little care, but they didn't think much about it because they thought they were too busy, Mr. Yin Guan would definitely hold Song Pin accountable." In addition, Chao Gun was in Liuxia continent and Song Gaoyuan was in Fuyao continent. Only he, Scrofulariaceae, who was a close neighbor in Jinjia continent, could not even think of staying out of the matter. Because Yu Yu had been to Luopa mountain, Chao Gun specially invited Yu Yu to his house for a drink. The old swordsman also brought Yi Du, a close disciple. Before Chao Gun entered the Summer Palace, he was still a sword cultivator in the Longmen realm. He entered the Golden Core realm after becoming a sword cultivator in the Yingguan lineage. Senior actually only needs one sentence to make Pu He shut up. Chao Gun joked, "When I was in Jindan, I dared to go to the Great Wall of Sword Qi to pass my sword to kill monsters." Yu Yu stroked his beard and smiled, shaking his head slightly. I can't say it, it would hurt my feelings too much." The reason why the two parties can become close friends with an irreversible relationship is because they are used to quarreling as soon as they meet. There are always some things that they will never mention. Chao Gun turned to look at Yedu and asked, "How is the injury?" Yedu grinned and said, "I have completely recovered. It's just that I wasted a lot of medicinal materials and time, which caused the breakthrough in cultivation to be much slower." Pu he nodded and said, being able to complete the flying sword of my life is really a blessing among misfortunes. Spending some immortal money is nothing. As for breaking through the realm one after another, with Yida's qualifications and the fact that I will teach you all the secrets of swordsmanship, there's no need to worry at all. Yedu said, I am anxious just because I recognize you as the master of nascent soul realm. Look at the other fellow villagers, which master is not of Yupu realm? Pu he, who was stabbed in the heart, glared and said, it's not like my master has never been to the Jade Pu realm. His swordsmanship has never fallen with the realm. His vision is right there. Yedu said, you can shut up now, Che Zulwan, and stop talking. After all, there were outsiders present, and Pu Lauer, who was a little embarrassed, became anxious. How can you talk to master? Yedu said, Chao Gun, my master treats you as an outsider. Chao Gun smiled and nodded gently. Pu he laughed loudly and said, Chao Gun, am a closed disciple, don't you have a bright mind? Tell the truth, can Yedu now enter the summer palace he used to have? Of course, the one who is more brilliant has to be Seshu. In short, 2 good disciples should each receive half of the true inheritance of their master. Chao Gun smiled and said, not for the time being. Yedu was about to speak but stopped. Forget it, it was rare that he didn't say a few words. When he left the Great Wall of Sword Chi, the young sword cultivator was in the cave mansion realm. It was only in the summer of this year that he broke through and entered the sea viewing realm. Having also broken through the first realm, senior sister Seshu has advanced from the sea viewing realm to the Dragon Gate realm. It can be seen that there is a certain gap in the qualifications between the two parties. Of course, this is related to the fact that Nodu was seriously injured and was injured at all. Pu he was passing by and found the dying boy from the pile of dead people. If there was such a difference, the boy would just like that. Pu he felt that this was fate, so he accepted Yidu, who didn't even have a last name, as a close disciple. In the Great Wall of Sword Chi, whether one is born into a high family or not depends very simply on whether the sword cultivator had a surname when he was young. As a rule, sword cultivators in the middle and fifth realms, whether nascent soul or Dongfu, must leave the city at certain times and rush to the battlefield outside the city. Being able to return to the top of the city alive is a skill, and being able to accumulate military exploits is even more important. If you don't have this ability, where you die, and whether you are far or near from the top of the city, depends on destiny. Anyway, there is no custom of burial in Jinchi Great Wall. The top of the city is the tomb. The battlefield outside the city is the cemetery. When Yidu arrived in the world, he seemed to only have 3 things to do: eat, practice swordplay and scold his master. On Master Pu He's side, Yidu has always been a man of his own, but Pu He is the one who dotes on this most ignorant and unruly disciple. Before leaving home, Pu He was in his own sect of the Fendus sect. Pu He's lineage was not weak in power, sitting on the 3 peaks. Later, several direct descendants, even if the master was not around to teach Taoism and swordsmanship, were still promising and doing well. There were 2 more disciples who held the opening ceremony on their own while Patriarch Pu was on the Great Wall of Sword Chi, glorifying his ancestors and killing all directions. It's a pity that these 2 secondary disciples are not sword cultivators. Occasionally when Pu He is in a good mood, he will call the secondary disciples to drink together. The old rule is that if you are not a nascent soul, you can stand with food and drink. The door style is unique. It is estimated that only Pu He can do this kind of thing, and it can be done in a way that both parties feel is natural. But now there are 2 more direct descendants. Nawada always eats and drinks while sitting down, but Seshu follows the local customs, eating and toasting standing up with his senior brothers, senior sisters, and nephews. As long as it is a wine bureau on the mountain where Pu He participates, Jean Dan Dixian is not qualified to sit down. Come or not if you like, drink or not, and can't bear it. Pu-hee's wine is good and he protects his shortcomings. He has the nickname of Timely Rain in Lixiazu. Any shady deeds, such as wanting to take personal revenge but not being able to do it, as long as you get to know Pu-hee and make the old sword immortal happy. Pu-hee never talks big at the wine table or promises anything to anyone, but he can always after a while. The other party no longer needs to take revenge. After all these years, Yedu still doesn't like Haoran Tianxia at all. When it comes to fellow seniors and sisters, or to the monks from the sect who are much older but want to call themselves junior uncles, or even supreme uncles, Yedu never has a smile on his face when he meets them. We're too lazy to nod, unwilling to get close to each other with false feelings. Nodu only had one thought: I will practice my sword, and I must make a name for myself within 100 years, so that I can go to the colorful world. But Yedu still admired the three of Chao Gun. Sword cultivators who have stayed in the summer palace must be respected. The exception was Mi Xiuhua, who used Yupu realm as food. Chao Gun asked with a smile, I heard Shuizhou said that she doesn't like master because of her average qualifications. Do you always want to leave her to others? Nodu rolled his eyes. That girl is a thief. Look, this is all a trick, and the master will not suffer any losses. Pu-hee was not angry but happy, laughing and said, Don't listen to her nonsense, it's just a matter of speculation. No, absolutely not. To be honest, Pu-hee does think that he is not good at teaching swordsmanship and Taoism. Therefore, regarding the arrangement of Seshu, Pu-hee's earliest plan at that time was to discuss with this apprentice whether he could persuade Seshu to change his sect and believe in her future achievements. It will only be higher. For example, Pu-hee would ask a female ancestor of a sect in Liuxia continent. Her realm was not high, like Yupu realm, but she was rich and cultivated her well. She can be regarded as one of Pu-hee's confidants. She has known her for many years, and now she is in charge of her sect's money and treasure house. This female cultivator has good looks, and she still has a girlish appearance. Now that she meets Pu-hee, she is still the sweet and charming Pu big brother. Her bones are going numb when she is called, but Pu-hee doesn't talk about anything else, except for the issue of men and women. Yes, it's still very clear. If you can't take responsibility, don't get out of bed. I also thought about whether I should let the sect leader accept Shuizhou as his direct heir, but after getting along for a long time, I couldn't bear to let him go. Pu-hee just pretended that such a thing had never happened before. In the past 2 years, the senior brother of the sect master has been asking, and he has been asking Pu-hee about this matter every now and then. He swore that as long as Shuizhou is willing to change his master, it must be his close disciple, and it is possible to take over as the sect master in the future. How long has it been since our Fendu's sect had a sword immortal sect master? What kind of disciples will you, Pu-hee, teach? You have always had free-range virtues. If you become a master for others, you will waste your resources and mislead others. Those earthly immortal disciples and secondary disciples are simply because you don't teach carefully. If you really want to, if you teach them carefully, they will not become successful. Pu-hee just turned a deaf ear. The reason why this sect leader's senior brother has a favorable eye for Seshu is that he has to admit that he does have a unique vision. On the one hand, Seshu has excellent sword training qualifications. Not to mention that he will definitely reach the 5th realm, and he will definitely reach the nascent soul realm in the future. More importantly, Seshu and Nodu have completely different temperaments. She usually doesn't like to talk, and she looks weak and weak. Yes, but Yenner is bad, and Pu-hee likes it very much. If Nodu is a pure sword cultivator, then Seshu is a pure genealogy monk. After all, in Pu-hee's view, if a genealogy monk is not as good as Yi Xiuye, he is not a genealogy monk. Today, the entire sect, except for Pu-hee and the sect leader, almost feels that she is a simple-minded little girl easily deceived, soft-spoken, and not defensive. But in Pu He's opinion, it was more of a joke when he and Chao Gun asked Yi Du whether he could go to the Summer Palace, but this girl Seshu can really go to the Summer Palace. When Pu He went to visit the Great Wall of Sword Chi, many immortal mansions on the top of Liuxia continent breathed a sigh of relief, except that they almost didn't hold a wine party to celebrate. In his hometown, Pu Leo Jiangxian has as many friends as enemies on the mountain, which is no joke. It's no wonder that Yedu asked Pu Lauer if he had so many enemies at Daoxian Mountain, would he be hacked to death as well? It's really that this master's reputation in his hometown is too bad. There was a soft knock on the door in the corridor, and Chao Gun smiled and said, "Come in." Shuizhou pushed the door open and closed it again, with an embarrassed look on his face, and said guiltily, "Master Chao Xian, I'm sorry to tell you that master is short of money now. He will have to pay back the money he borrowed from you at Lingjizhai later." At that time, Chao Gun and Yi Du were sitting on the steps outside the gate of Lingjizhai. Pu He asked Shuizhou to borrow fairy money twice, which in total amounted to only a dozen rain coins. In the words of Master Pu He, that boy Chao Gun is rich. We, master and disciple, will not repay this kind of small money unless we can. Chao Gun smiled and said, "It's okay to pay back the money later, it will be calculated as interest anyway." Pu He looked stiff, and Nodu took a breath of air. Sure enough, none of these people who came out of the Summer Palace were fuel-efficient lamps, and none of them were good birds. Seshu smiled and spread her hand slightly towards the master. The apprentice had done his best. Although Pu He is an orthodox cultivator, he is proficient in disguise and evasion. In addition to swordsmanship, he knows more about heresy, or crooked ways, than swordsmanship. The 3 northwest continents of Hauran are full of deeds by Pu Jiangxian who must leave his name. Yomizawa Yeshio and martial arts warriors all respected this wild old swordsman Pu Lao. Otherwise, Jiang Shangjin, who had a bad reputation at the time, would not be called the second Pu He in Luzhou, Beiju. The reason why Pu He went to the Great Wall of Sword Chi in the first place was not only because he wanted to make great achievements there, but also had something to do with the failure of his sect. Just saying that he was a senior fellow from the sect, he said harsh words to Pu He face to face. "Junior brother Pu, if you don't change your old habits like this, I have only 2 choices, either I won't be the sect leader and you will be, and our Fendu sect will be destroyed in your hands, and it's over. Either you will be expelled from the school by me, and you will no longer be a genealogy monk of our Fendu sect." Pu He was heartbroken by this heartless senior brother, and it was a good thing that he had given up his position as the leader of the clan to him. In a fit of anger, Pu He went to the Sword Chi Great Wall that he had wanted to visit for a long time. As a result, he was tricked by a certain fool. He called himself brother and sister at the wine table and swore that Miyu was a piece of trash that had never been seen in the Great Wall of Sword Chi in thousands of years. If he didn't suppress such a soft persimmon, he would not be able to stand up to Pu. "Brother, you have this invincible sword energy that is unparalleled in this continent. This kind of fame is given to one person for nothing, and it is simply impossible to tolerate it when it is dropped on the ground without even picking it up. If I hadn't been 2 levels higher than Miyu and had to challenge him every day, my winning record would have gone up and down." Pu He did feel a little guilty for his own sect, thinking that if he succeeded in Wenjian, he would become the first person in the history of Hauran world to win the Jianqi Great Wall Sword Cultivator in the same realm. After leaving the wine table, he went to ask Miyu about swordsmanship. Everyone was in the Yupu realm. Pu He was famous among the upper 5 realms in his hometown for his outstanding killing power and many insidious methods. No matter how he looked at it, it's an easy thing to do. Miyu was reluctant to take the sword at first. "Did I provoke you? Are you okay with asking me about swordsmanship? Why don't you ask someone else, Sun Ju Yuan or Gao Kuei?" If you win against me, do you really have any dignity at all? The more Pooh he listened, the more confident he became, so he began to use the provoking method, which was the killer trick he had given to Pooh he. Actually just one sentence. Me who is truly blessed to have a precious brother like you in his previous life. Sure enough, Miyu, who was still a little careless at first, immediately agreed to the question with a dark face. In the end, if Miyu hadn't sheathed his sword in the end and showed mercy, Pooh he would have almost been stopped. Didn't he just say that Miyu was just an embroidered pillow with an empty jade purity realm, and that all his energy was spent on women? When Pooh he accepted the bet and accepted defeat, he went to settle the score with that bastard. In the end, he was beaten up and scolded Pooh he for losing the face of our Howren sword immortal. He, Liang, does not have such a useless brother. From now on, he will walk like water. If you don't want to offend, just pretend that you don't know each other. Perhaps because he saw that Pooh he was really miserable, he comforted him, but he just asked Jian what happened if he lost. It was just that he stayed on the Great Wall of Jian-Chi for 100 years as agreed. We brothers can be companions, right? Not beautiful. Dogs are real dogs. The past is unbearable to look back on, and every time I think of it I shed a handful of bitter tears. But the other party finally said something, saying that Pooh he would not regret staying here for 100 years. Of course Pooh he didn't believe it at that time. Now that I think about it, that finally said something human. In the middle of the night, Seshu took the lead and was responsible for threading the needle. The 8 sword fairy embryos from the Great Wall of Sword Chi reunited in a foreign land. They didn't talk much at the inn last time, and now they were finally able to leave their master behind and gather here to chat. They are similar in age, not much different, but in fact the atmosphere is not too harmonious. It is far from the scene that outsiders imagine when fellow villagers meet with fellow villagers and burst into tears. It was learned that Yu Qingzhang had left the Great Wall of Sword Chi with the young Yingguan, and had also gone to the Aquarius continent to practice at Luoluo Mountain for a period of time. Jin Wan and Sun Zhao looked at each other. What on earth were Yu Qingzhang and He Xiangting thinking? The master they were looking for, Yu, seemed to be only in the Jade Pooh realm, right? It's not that they looked down on Mr. Yu, but no matter how they looked at it, leaving after going to Luoluo Mountain was not a good choice, right? Yedu was the most rude in his words, and was thorny when he opened his mouth. Is there something wrong with you too? If you don't wait for Luopa Shin, you will have the opportunity to be the direct disciple of Lord Yingguan, but you have to follow an old swordsman in the Yupu realm everywhere. Wandering around. Forget about me leaving Luopa Mountain on my own initiative, even if Master Yingguan chases me away. Does this kind of behavior count? Senior Sister Seshu, you like reading, tell me about it. Seshu tilted his head and said with a smile, repaying kindness with hatred. This statement is a bit harsh. If I change it to ungratefulness, it may be more accurate. Juxing was equally dissatisfied with the two choices, but the boy seemed to be born not to talk, and with Nodu helping him to speak, he was even more lazy to talk. He Xiangting's face was ashen and he clenched his fists, obviously very angry. Yu Qingzhang said calmly, we can find whoever we want to be our master. It's none of your business. In 10 years, I guess you will still be in the Sevuing realm. Then we will see if you have the confidence to talk to us like this. Nodu sneered, wait. It turned out that Xie Songhua took the initiative and suggested that they and their respective disciples have a sword competition with each other every 60 years to compare and rank. Therefore, among their group of sword cultivators, the real opponent in their minds, or the one who most needs to be surpassed, is Chen Li, nicknamed Little Yingguan. Of course, there are also swordsmen like Sun Zhao who feel that it doesn't matter even if they are at the bottom. Anyway, if you lose this time, there will be another time. Shuizhou asked with a smile, I heard that you have met Pei Qian. The gesture is just a nod. Chao Mu started pouring beans out of the bamboo tube, and talked about the invincible boxing skills of Sister Pei. At the Lei Gong Temple in Azu, she was able to box with Lu Suiyu, who was a level above her, and they had a good fight. Juxing and Xiaomu were only 7 or 8 years old when they left their hometown. Compared with Chao Mu, who has a lively personality, his appearance is obviously more mature. His usual words, deeds, and mood are as steady as an old man. Chao Mu's house in her hometown is on the same street as Guozhujiu. Sister Guo likes to call herself my master's temporarily closed disciple. A few years ago, Lord Yinguan's first disciple, Sister Pei Qian, gave them 2 specially made bookmarks from Luola Mountain as a meeting gift. They were made of green bamboo leaves and had a message written on them. That was the first time Chao Mu saw him receiving gifts after following his master to Haoran Tianxia. Before that, when I traveled to the 3 continents covered by the golden armor and flowing clouds, many elder immortal masters wanted to give gifts, but they did so with a straight face, hands in their sleeves, deliberately turning a blind eye, and never saying a word. Even if Chao Mu just asked a question afterwards, she was scolded until she cried, and she was threatened not to talk to him in the future, otherwise she would be beaten. It's really tiring to let Xie Songhua, a young girl, be the master of 2 children. Moreover, the 2 apprentices are really difficult to take care of. One is brooding, doesn't like to talk all day long, and likes to be alone. If he talks occasionally, it will hurt his heart. Can make another fellow countryman of the same age burst into tears all of a sudden, and asking Xie Songhua, who is used to asking questions about swords, to comfort people, really makes her mentally and physically exhausted. That's why she told Pei Qian back then that your master is better at raising children than being a hidden official. Jin Luan praised, she is indeed the founding disciple of Lord Yinguan. In Jinjia continent, you can hear about her legendary deeds wherever you go. The immortal mansion on Jinjiazu mountain and the kingdoms below the mountain highly respected the female martial arts master Jing Qian. In fact, it is not common for swordsmen to talk about martial arts. He Xiangding and Yu Qingzhang met Pei Qian for the first time in Huanggeji, the blessed place of Yunku in Tonggishao. In my impression, she is a young woman with round hair in a bun, clean and neat, with clear eyebrows. Even when she was around Mr. Yinguan, she still didn't seem to talk much. If Pei Qian had not had a tense confrontation with Pushunyi Yunyun, which was deeply memorable, we would probably have felt that she was a gentlewoman who was knowledgeable, courteous, and kind to others. So when they arrived at Master Yingguan's hometown and went to Mount Luopa, the 9 children could not overlay the 2 images of Jing Qian and Pei Qian together. Most of them were extremely jealous and afraid of the little senior brother and Big White Goose, the young man in white. Bad atmosphere. Seshu was the first to break the silence and said with a smile, "It's noisy, but we are still from the same hometown." Juxian nodded and said, "If something happens in the future, please remember to say hello to each other. We don't want to trouble our elders all the time, let alone Mr. Yinguan." Yu Qingzhang said, "We are also very grateful to Master Chao." Jin Luan asked doubtfully, "Master Chao?" He Xiangting explained, "Master Yinguan has an alias named Chao Mo. Let us call him Master Chao." Yedu sat on the railing, crossed his arms across his chest, and said, "Tell me what kind of place Luola Mountain is." Not far away, Song Pin and Xie Songhua smiled at each other and breathed a sigh of relief. "I'm really afraid that they will fight, flying swords will fly around, and they will become a mess." Later, Lu Ji secretly visited Chuanjiao Mountain and took a look at the mineral vein. He roughly confirmed that there was no formation inside. She stayed not long before returning to the Dragon Elephant Sword sect in Nanpa Sua continent. After that, there is the Luzhou Luomahi Lu family in Beiju, and the Yuanying realm sword cultivator Lu Su. At the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he and Situ Jiu were drinking buddies who met frequently, but they almost never spoke. In fact, a girl in a mink hat with rosy cheeks also came here during the period. She found a busy market, opened the package, squatted on the ground, and set up a stall for a long time, bargaining with others. She was very energetic and earned a few snow coins. She also wandered around secretly, and she found a sneaky Ascension Realm monk, the kind that was freshly baked. He had just broken out of the immortal realm a few days ago, and found out that the other person was just a person who was going to come here to do serious business. Although he was a bit ambitious, he secretly wanted to win over the Jinpu dynasty to swallow up the mine together, and then he had a very good chat with His Majesty the Emperor, who was visiting privately incognito. They probably drank some wine, and the conversation was in full swing, and he said he talked about the Great Wall of Sword Qi, how the summer palace was, Chen Qing was not so good, and the young hermit official was not so good. She didn't embarrass the other party very much. She waited patiently for them to finish talking, and then started counting in her mind. She waited and waited, counting from 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to more than 9,000, and then she lightly slashed the other party with her sword, and she replied. As soon as Xiago left, it was like doing a job of killing and not burying him, leaving a mess behind. The Ascension monk, who was at the peak of his spiritual life, naturally mistakenly thought that he had received a sword from someone among the sword immortals. He hesitated again and again, but was still angry. He endured it again and again, and finally one day he was still a swordsman. Unable to resist, he showed up openly, showed his identity, and went to the lobby of the mansion to ask for an explanation. He was certain that there was no chance of others eavesdropping on some of his words. To put it another way, even if they are listened to, what can they do? After all, the Sword Qi Great Wall is a dilapidated ruins. Feishing City is far away in the colorful world. Next time, when you open the door and close it again, don't let anyone get in the way. Since among this group of sword cultivators, Xia Songhua and Song Pin have not yet reached the immortal realm, he feels that he has the right to argue with them anyway. You sword cultivators who are used to acting domineeringly, don't having been to the Sword Qi Great Wall once, I really thought I could do whatever I wanted here. Chao Gun and the others did find it puzzling, but they also explained to the great monk from Fuyazhou, who had been silently disappearing in the Jade Pu realm for decades and ascended to the Ascension realm as soon as he came out. The previous sword had nothing to do with them. Senior, you have found the wrong person. Xia Songhua, who carried a bamboo sword case on her back, sat on a chair with her eyes closed to meditate. Song Pin, who was carrying a Fuyao sword, frowned slightly. Pu, he clicked his tongue in surprise, thinking that Fuyazhou had been beaten to pieces before, but he didn't see you showing up on any battlefield to show off your majesty. Song Gaoyuan said, Senior has spied on this place at least twice, we just don't care. In addition, I believe that Senior knows it well. If we really draw the sword, there is no reason to deny it. Situ Jiu spoke from the bottom of his heart, Xia Songhua, Pu He and I will help you buy time. Don't be too light with your sword. Xia Songhua yawned, what nonsense. Song Pin reminded him from the bottom of his heart, don't rush into action. Chao Gun and others have discussed it. The Ascension Realm monk who was exposed looked slightly sluggish, and said with a smile, there are sword cultivators in the room, do you dare to do it or not admit it? Song Gaoyuan and Scrofulary AC looked at each other and smiled. They have asked the young sword cultivators to withdraw from this place. Chao Gun still had a soft and melodious voice, waving his hands. Senior received a sword attack for no reason, and it is normal to be angry about it. No one can find any fault in it, and we understand it. I just want to state it again, we don't need it. There is really no need to deliberately deny anything. At the same time, since the senior is here to seek money, he should just do business with the Jin Pu dynasty. There is also no need to take advantage of the opportunity to consolidate the leadership position of the first person on Fuyasu Mountain. Use us to establish your authority. The Ascension Realm monk gently touched his palms and pretended to admire him. Young men, you are worthy of being experienced in a certain place. Each one is calmer than the other. You are a thief with a sincere heart. Are you really confident? The female sword cultivator at the Golden Core Realm also had a bad temper and said in a deep voice, Senior Shujuan, must you be so aggressive? This person's human name is Su Jun, and his real name is Wang Jia. In this Fuyao continent, there was once a Jade Pu realm with a low reputation. Somehow, it has now transformed into an Ascension realm. If she remembered correctly, before the war, this man was the protector of the country, national advisor, and chief minister of several countries. Did you calculate that there would be a military disaster and avoid it early? Wang Jia said calmly, Here, Jean Dan has no place to speak. Just as she was about to stand up, she felt like she was drowning. She was pinned down on the seat by a majestic Taoist spirit, unable to move. Xie Songhua raised an eyebrow. Song Pin suddenly said from his heart, Just chop him to death. Yu Yu was waiting for this sentence. As a result, at this moment, an additional woman appeared at the door. Ning Yao is here. The Ascension Realm monk turned his head. After recognizing the other party's identity, his expression changed drastically and his thoughts changed rapidly. He wanted to say a few polite words before heading back home. She stood outside the threshold and asked, Where is such and such a place? Tell me about it. Wang Jia's face was full of resentment. In fact, he had no intention of speaking. In an instant, this ascended realm man used several special escape and blinding methods at the same time. Still, a sharp sword energy pierced his back vest on the spot, and then he was dragged towards the wall by the huge inertia, and his whole body was nailed to the wall. The Yinshan wanted to leave the body and travel far away, but was chopped into pieces by the sword energy, and was forced to return to his true body. As soon as an ethereal statue appeared, it was smashed to pieces by the sword energy. Some of the more hidden and mysterious magical powers of this Ascension Realm person, just because the long river of time in the room seemed to be blocked by the sword energy, flowing backwards, like water flowing backwards, became false and destined to be in vain. Ning Yao didn't even look at the paper-made ascending realm. She crossed the threshold and smiled with the female golden elixir cultivator who was not high in the realm and not very courageous. Chao Gun and Song Pin all stood up, and there was a tacit understanding. No one called Ning Yao a hidden official. Naturally, Ning Yao didn't care about this. After thinking about it, she still felt that someone was better at handling this kind of thing. So someone in a green shirt and long coat immediately twirled his talisman and wandered over. He appeared at the door in an instant, crossed the threshold, shook his fists a few times, and said with a smile, What's going on? You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.